Victor Harmon grabbed the lawyer by his collar and slammed him against the wall. Papers scattered across the floor. The secretary screamed. Victor didn't care. His face was inches from the terrified attorney's spit, flying as he shouted. "You listen to me, you worthless piece of garbage. That farm belongs to me. I don't give a damn what that old woman wrote in her will. I waited 40 years for Eleanor to die. 40 years of pretending to care about her, pretending to love her, waiting for the day I could finally sell everything she hoarded in that barn. And now you're telling me she left it all to some pregnant nobody who doesn't even know what she's inheriting." He tightened his grip. "Find me a way to break that will, or I swear to God I'll destroy that girl before she ever sets foot on my property. I'll take everything from her. Everything. And when I'm done, she'll wish she'd never heard the name Bennett." Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel and follow this incredible story to the very end. Drop a comment below telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled across the world. Clara Bennett woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She didn't want to open her eyes. Didn't want to face another day of pretending everything was fine when her entire world was falling apart. But the buzzing wouldn't stop, and her bladder was screaming at her the way it always did now that she was 7 months pregnant. She reached for the phone without looking. "Hello? Clara, it's me." Her blood turned to ice. Marcus, the man who had walked out on her 2 months ago, the man who had looked at her pregnant belly and said he wasn't ready to be tied down. "What do you want? I heard you got evicted." Clara sat up slowly, her hand pressing against her swollen stomach. "How did you hear that?" "Jenny told me." "She ran into your neighbor at the grocery store." He paused. "Look, I'm not calling to fight. I just wanted to say I'm sorry things worked out this way." "Sorry." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You emptied our savings account and disappeared in the middle of the night. You left me pregnant and alone with nothing. And now you're sorry." "I panicked, okay? I wasn't ready to be a father. I'm still not ready." "Then why are you calling?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I met someone. Her name's Brittany. We're moving to California next week. I wanted you to hear it from me before you saw it on Facebook." Clara couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. She had known Marcus wasn't coming back, had accepted that months ago, but hearing him say he had already moved on, that he was starting a new life with someone else while she struggled to survive, felt like a knife twisting in her gut. "Congratulations," she whispered. "Clara, don't be like that." "Don't be like what? Don't be upset that you abandoned me and our baby to run off with someone named Brittany." Her voice was rising now, anger replacing the shock. "You're a coward, Marcus. You've always been a coward, and I hope you and Brittany are very happy together." She hung up before he could respond and threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking on impact. She didn't care. She couldn't afford to fix it anyway. That was when she saw the pink paper that had been slipped under her door. Clara knew what it was before she picked it up. She had been waiting for it, dreading it, knowing it was only a matter of time. The eviction notice was printed in bold black letters on cheerful pink paper as if the color could somehow soften the blow of being thrown out on the street. 3 days. She had 3 days to vacate the premises. She sank onto the edge of her bed and stared at the notice until the words blurred. $47 in her bank account. No job, no family, no friends who could take in a pregnant woman with nothing to offer. She had applied to every restaurant, every grocery store, every fast food joint in the city. No one was hiring a woman who couldn't stand for 8 hours without her feet swelling up like balloons. The baby kicked hard as if sensing her distress. "I know," Clara whispered, rubbing her belly. "I'm scared too." A knock on the door made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. The landlord had already delivered his message, and Marcus was apparently too busy packing for California to show up in person. She opened the door to find her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a casserole dish. "I made too much," Mrs. Patterson said, pushing past Clara into the apartment. "Don't argue with me. You need to eat." "Mrs. Patterson, I can't keep taking food from you." "You can and you will." The old woman set the dish on the counter and turned to face Clara with sharp, knowing eyes. "I saw the notice under your door. Pink paper. Same color they used when they tried to evict me 30 years ago. Clara's composure cracked. "I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to go. Marcus called this morning to tell me he's moving to California with his new girlfriend, and I have $47 and a baby coming in 2 months, and I just..." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to fix this." Mrs. Patterson pulled her into a hug, and Clara let herself cry. She cried for everything she had lost. For the father she had never known. For the mother who had died when she was 3. for the foster homes that had shuffled her from place to place like an unwanted package, for the man who had promised to love her and then walked away when things got hard. "Something will work out," Mrs. Patterson murmured, stroking her hair. "It always does." Clara wanted to believe her. She desperately wanted to believe that the universe had something better planned for her, but in her experience, things didn't work out. They fell apart. Her phone rang again, the cracked screen lighting up from where it lay on the floor. Clara ignored it. "Answer it," Mrs. Patterson said. "It's probably another debt collector. Or it might be something else. Answer it." Clara picked up the phone. The number was unfamiliar, a Vermont area code she didn't recognize. "Hello? Is this Clara Marie Bennett?" A man's voice, professional and measured. "Who's asking?" "My name is Richard Hartwell. I'm an attorney with Hartwell and Associates in Burlington, Vermont. I've been trying to reach you for several days regarding your grandmother Eleanor Bennett." Clara's legs went weak. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. "My grandmother? I don't have a grandmother." There was a pause on the other end. "Miss Bennett, I'm sorry to inform you that Eleanor Bennett passed away 2 weeks ago. She left specific instructions for me to contact you upon her death." "There must be some mistake. I grew up in foster care. I don't have any family." "I understand this must be confusing, but I assure you there's no mistake. Eleanor was your maternal grandmother. She kept track of you over the years, even though circumstances prevented her from being part of your life." Clara sank into a chair, her mind reeling. A grandmother. She had a grandmother who had apparently known about her all along and never reached out. "Why?" Clara's voice came out as a whisper. "Why didn't she ever contact me?" "That's something I'd prefer to discuss in person, Miss Bennett. Your grandmother left you her entire estate, a 50-acre farm in Willowbrook, Vermont. The house, the land, the barn, everything. She also left a letter explaining her reasons for staying away. I think you'll find the answers you're looking for there." Clara couldn't process what she was hearing. Yesterday she was facing homelessness. Today she was inheriting a farm from a grandmother she never knew existed. "I don't have money for a bus ticket to Vermont." "Your grandmother anticipated that. She left instructions for me to wire you $10,000 for travel and immediate expenses. It should be in your account within the hour." $10,000. That's just the beginning, Miss Bennett. Your grandmother was a wealthy woman. The farm alone is worth several $100,000, and there are other assets as well. He paused. "But I should warn you, there's someone who may try to contest the will. Your grandmother's nephew, Victor Harmon. He's been calling my office daily since Eleanor's death, demanding to know why he was excluded from the inheritance." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Excluded?" "Your grandmother changed her will 6 months ago. She specifically named you as her sole beneficiary and explicitly excluded Victor Harmon from receiving anything. He was not happy when I informed him of this." "Why would she exclude him?" "I don't know the details, but Eleanor made it clear that Victor was never to set foot on that property again. She said he was dangerous, that he only cared about money, and that he would destroy everything she had built if given the chance." Another pause. "Be careful, Miss Bennett. Victor Harmon is not a man who accepts defeat gracefully." Clara hung up the phone and sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Patterson was watching her with wide eyes. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I just inherited a farm." Clara left Detroit 2 days later. Mrs. Patterson's nephew drove her to the bus station, refusing to accept payment. The old woman had pressed $100 into Clara's hand before she left, despite Clara's protests. "Pay me back when you're on your feet." "Mrs." Patterson said. "And send me pictures of that farm. I want to see where my favorite neighbor ends up." The bus ride to Burlington took 14 hours. Clara spent most of it staring out the window, watching the industrial landscape of Detroit give way to the rolling hills of upstate New York, and finally the green mountains of Vermont. Her hand never left her belly, and every time the baby kicked, she whispered the same thing. "We're going to be okay. We're going to be okay." She didn't know if she believed it yet, but she was trying. Richard Hartwell met her at the bus station. He was older than she expected, with kind eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a gentle handshake that somehow made her feel less alone. "Thank you for coming, Miss Bennett. I know this must be overwhelming." "That's an understatement." He smiled sympathetically and led her to his car. The drive to his office took them through the quaint downtown area of Burlington, past shops and restaurants that looked like something out of a postcard. Clara couldn't remember the last time she had been somewhere so clean, so peaceful, so different from the gray streets of Detroit. In his office, Hartwell spread the legal documents across his desk and walked her through each one: the deed to the farm, the title to the land, the inventory of assets. Clara's eyes widened as she saw the numbers. The property is valued at approximately $400,000, Hartwell explained, but that doesn't include the contents of the barn which your grandmother specifically mentioned in her will. She was very insistent that only you should have access to it. What's in the barn? Hartwell shook his head. I don't know. Eleanor never told me, but she gave me this to give to you. He slid a brass key across the desk. It was old, tarnished, with age, heavy with history. She said you would understand when you saw it. Clara picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. You said she left me a letter. Yes. Hartwell handed her an envelope with her name written on the front in shaky, elegant script. She wrote this a week before she died. She made me promise you would read it before signing any papers. Clara opened the envelope with trembling fingers and pulled out the letter. My dearest Clara, I know you must be angry with me. You have every right to be. I watched you grow up from a distance, knowing you were alone, knowing you were struggling, and I did nothing to help. I need you to understand why. When your mother died, I tried to get custody of you. I hired lawyers. I fought the system, but the court said I was too old, too isolated. They said a child needed to be with a younger family in a better environment. They placed you in foster care, and every legal avenue I pursued was blocked. I could have fought harder. I could have done more. But I was grieving Clara. I had just lost my only daughter, and I didn't have the strength to keep fighting a system that seemed determined to keep us apart. That was my greatest failure. I will regret it until the day I die. But I never stopped watching over you. I hired people to track your progress to make sure you were safe. I know about the foster homes, some good, most bad. I know about the struggles you faced. I know about Marcus, and if he weren't already out of your life, I would have found a way to remove him myself. What I'm leaving you is more than a farm, Clara. It's a legacy. 4 generations of Bennett women have poured their hearts into that land. Your great-great-grandmother Margaret started something extraordinary in 1920, and every woman in our family has added to it since. The barn holds secrets that have been kept for 100 years. When you're ready, open it. What you find inside will change your life. You come from strong women, Clara. Survivors. Creators. Women who built empires in secret and left the world more beautiful than they found it. That strength is in your blood. It's in the child you're carrying. Take care of the farm, protect what's in the barn, and don't let Victor Harmon anywhere near it. He's dangerous, Clara, more dangerous than you know. I love you, granddaughter. I only wish I could have told you in person. Start fresh, start over. The farm will lift you again, forever yours. Grandma Eleanor. Clara read the letter 3 times. Tears streaming down her face. A grandmother who had loved her, a grandmother who had watched over her from afar, a grandmother who had left her everything. Miss Bennett, Hartwell's voice was gentle. Are you all right? She knew about me, all those years she knew. She talked about you often, showed me your picture every birthday. She said you had her daughter's eyes. Clara wiped her tears and looked at the lawyer. Tell me about Victor Harmon. Hartwell's expression darkened. He's Eleanor's nephew, her brother's son. He's been circling that farm for 40 years, waiting for Eleanor to die so he could inherit. When she changed her will 6 months ago, he was furious. He came to my office screaming about being cheated out of his birthright. But it's not his birthright. He's not her child. That doesn't matter to Victor. In his mind, he's entitled to that property. He's already hired lawyers to contest the will. So far, everything is solid. Eleanor made sure of that. But Victor isn't the kind of man who gives up easily. What should I do? Go to the farm. Establish yourself there. Document everything you find, especially in the barn. Whatever Eleanor was protecting, it's clearly valuable enough that Victor is willing to fight for it. Hartwell leaned forward. And Miss Bennett, be careful. Victor Harmon has a temper, and he doesn't handle disappointment well. The drive to Willowbrook took 2 hours. Clara rented a car with some of the money Eleanor had left, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she navigated the winding mountain roads. The GPS led her through increasingly rural landscapes past farms and forests and small towns that seemed frozen in time. When she finally turned onto the gravel driveway marked by a weathered sign reading Willowbrook Farm, she had to pull over and catch her breath. The property spread out before her like something from a dream. Rolling fields stretched toward distant tree lines. Wildflowers dotted the meadows. The farmhouse stood at the end of the long drive, white paint peeling but solid, a porch wrapping around the front like welcoming arms. And behind the house, massive and mysterious, stood the barn. Clara drove slowly up the driveway, taking it all in. This was hers, all of it. After 24 years of having nothing, she suddenly had everything. A man emerged from the house as she parked. He was in his 60s, weathered by sun and hard work, with kind eyes, paws that crinkled when he smiled. You must be Clara. I'm Samuel Torres. Been taking care of this place for 15 years. Clara shook his hand, grateful for the friendly face. Eleanor's letter mentioned a caretaker. Thank you for staying. Wouldn't be anywhere else. Your grandmother was good to me. Said you were coming that told me to make sure the place was ready. He glanced at her belly. She didn't mention you were pregnant. She didn't know. I didn't even know she existed until 2 days ago. Samuel nodded slowly. That sounds like Eleanor. Kept her secrets close. Even from me. He gestured toward the house. Come inside. I made soup. You look like you haven't eaten in days. Clara followed him into the farmhouse, her eyes taking in everything. The worn hardwood floors, the stone fireplace, the bookshelves lined with old volumes, photographs on the mantel showing women she didn't recognize, generations of Bennett women who had come before her. Samuel ladled soup into a bowl and set it in front of her at the kitchen table. Eat, then I'll show you around. Clara ate in silence, savoring the warmth of the homemade soup, the first real meal she'd had in weeks. Through the window she could see the barn, its massive doors secured with a chain and padlock. Samuel, what do you know about the barn? He hesitated before answering. Not much. Eleanor never let anyone inside, not even me. She said it was family business, and I respected that. But you must have suspicions. I know she spent hours in there every day. I know she had shipments come and go, always at night, always handled herself. And I know Victor Harmon would do just about anything to get his hands on whatever's inside. Clara felt a chill despite the warm soup. Richard Hartwell warned me about Victor. Good, because Victor's been calling here every day since Eleanor died, demanding I let him onto the property. I told him the same thing Eleanor would have told him. Go to hell. Clara almost smiled. He came to my apartment in Detroit, threatened me. Samuel's expression hardened. He found you there already. He knew about the will before I did, offered me $300,000 to sign over the property. $300,000. Samuel laughed bitterly. He thinks that's all it's worth. Either he's lying to you, or he has no idea what Eleanor actually built here. What did she build? Samuel met her eyes. I think you need to find that out for yourself. That night, Clara lay in her grandmother's bed, wrapped in a quilt that smelled of lavender and cedar, and stared at the ceiling. The brass key sat on the nightstand beside her, glinting in the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. She couldn't stop thinking about the letter. About the grandmother who had watched her from afar for 24 years. About the secrets hidden in the barn. About Victor Harmon and his threats. The baby kicked and Clara pressed her hand against her belly. Tomorrow, she whispered, tomorrow we'll find out what she left us. She fell asleep to the sound of wind rustling through the trees and dreamed of women. And she had never met standing in front of the barn beckoning her forward. Clara woke to the sound of tires on gravel. She sat up slowly, her pregnancy making every movement an effort, and looked out the window. A black Mercedes was coming up the driveway, completely out of place against the rustic landscape. Her heart hammered. She already knew who it was. She pulled on a robe and hurried downstairs as fast as her swollen belly would allow. Samuel was already at the front door, his body blocking the entrance. I told you not to come here, Victor. This isn't your property anymore. Step aside, old man. I'm not here to see you. Clara pushed past Samuel and faced Victor Harmon for the first time in person. He was exactly as she had imagined. Had expensive suit silver hair eyes that held no warmth at all. You must be Clara. He looked her up and down, his lip curling. Eleanor's long-lost granddaughter. Funny how she never mentioned you in 40 years, and suddenly you're the sole beneficiary of her will. She mentioned me in her letter. She watched me my whole life. So she says, but I have documents that tell a different story. Victor pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is a copy of Eleanor's will from 1998, the one where she promises to leave the farm to me upon her death, the one she apparently forgot about when she changed her will 6 months ago. Clara's blood ran cold. That doesn't mean anything. People change their wills all the time. True, but they don't usually change them when they're showing signs of dementia. Victor smiled, and it was the coldest expression Clara had ever seen. I have medical records, Clara, records showing that Eleanor was losing her mental faculties for years before she died. Any lawyer worth his salt will argue that she wasn't competent to change her will, that the original document should stand. You're lying. Am I? I guess we'll find out in court. He stepped closer and Samuel moved to block him. Victor ignored the older man, his eyes fixed on Clara. I'm giving you one more chance. Take the $300,000 and walk away. It's more money than you've ever seen in your life. Enough to start over, somewhere else raise your baby in comfort. And if I don't, Then I'll tie this estate up in litigation for years. You won't be able to sell anything, access any accounts, or do anything with this property until the courts decide who the rightful owner is. By then, you'll have spent every penny you have on lawyer fees, and you'll end up with nothing anyway." He leaned in close enough that Clara could smell his cologne. "Take the deal, little girl. You're out of your depth here." Clara wanted to back down. Every survival instinct she had developed in foster care was screaming at her to take the money and run. But something stopped her, something in her grandmother's letter, something in the way Samuel was standing beside her, refusing to yield. "No." Victor's smile faltered. "What?" "I said no. This farm belongs to me. My grandmother left it to me, and I'm not going to let you steal it." For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Victor's eyes. Then he stepped back, adjusting his tie, his composure returning. "You're making a mistake, Clara, a very big mistake." He turned to leave, then paused at his car door. "Oh, and one more thing. I'd be careful if I were you. Old farmhouses can be dangerous places. Accidents happen all the time, especially to pregnant women living alone." He drove away, leaving Clara shaking on the porch. Samuel put a hand on her shoulder. "That was brave." "That was stupid. He's going to destroy me." "Maybe. Or maybe Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing when she left you this farm." Samuel turned her to face him. "Victor's been trying to get his hands on this property for 40 years. Eleanor spent all that time building something worth protecting. Don't you want to know what it is?" Clara looked at the barn, its massive doors still chained shut. Whatever was inside had driven her grandmother to exclude her own nephew from her will, had driven Victor to make threats against a pregnant woman he had never met. It was time to find out what was worth fighting for. She retrieved the brass key from the nightstand and walked across the yard with Samuel beside her. The morning sun was warm on her face, but she couldn't shake the chill that had settled in her bones since Victor's visit. The chain was old, the metal rough with rust, but the padlock was newer. Eleanor must have replaced it recently. Clara fitted the brass key into the lock and turned. It clicked open smoothly. She unwound the chain, letting it fall to the ground, and grasped the iron handle. "Ready?" Samuel asked. "No." Clara pulled the door open anyway. Light spilled into the darkness, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Clara stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim interior. And then she saw it. The barn was filled with furniture. Not ordinary furniture, mass-produced pieces from discount stores, but handcrafted works of art. Tables with inlaid patterns so intricate they seemed impossible. Chairs with carved backs depicting scenes of nature. Cabinets with joinery so perfect the seams were nearly invisible. Clara walked deeper into the barn, her hand trailing over the smooth surfaces. Each piece was more beautiful than the last. A rocking chair carved with wildflowers. A desk with hidden compartments. A bed frame that looked like it belonged in a museum. "My God," Samuel breathed behind her. "I knew she was talented, but this?" At the back of the barn, wooden crates were stacked nearly to the ceiling. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one labeled with numbers and dates going back decades. Clara pried open the nearest crate. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, were carvings. Small wooden figurines no bigger than her hand. A horse in mid-gallop, a mother bear with cubs, two wolves standing side by side so lifelike they seemed about to move. She found a file cabinet tucked behind the crates and pulled open the top drawer. Folders organized by number, each containing correspondence. She pulled one out at random and read the letter inside. "Dear Mrs. Bennet, I am writing once again regarding the wolf pair numbers 147 and 148. My previous offer of $30,000 was declined, but I remain committed to acquiring these pieces for my collection. I am now prepared to offer $50,000 for the pair. Please consider my proposal. Your work has brought immense joy to collectors around the world. These pieces would be treasured for generations. Respectfully, Margaret Whitmore, Seattle, Washington, $50,000 for two small wooden wolves." Clara's legs gave out. She sank onto an old stool, her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. She pulled out more folders. More letters. Offers of $20,000, $40,000, $80,000. For furniture, for carvings, for pieces created by Bennett women over the span of a century. "Samuel, how much is all this worth?" "I don't know, but if those letters are any indication—" He trailed off, shaking his head in disbelief. Clara found a stack of journals on a workbench. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the pages, documenting decades of work. Sales techniques, thoughts on her craft, and scattered throughout mentions of Clara herself. "I think about her every day. My granddaughter. Lost in the system because I wasn't strong enough to fight for her. But I keep working. Keep creating. Keep building something that will be here when she needs it." Clara closed the journal, tears streaming down her face. She built all this for me. Spent her whole life building it. She loved you, Clara. More than anything in this world. A loose photograph fell from the pages. Clara picked it up and felt her breath catch. It was a picture of her mother. Young, beautiful, standing in front of this very barn with a carving tool in her hand. On the back, in Eleanor's handwriting, "My Sarah. The best of us all." Clara had no photographs of her mother. None. The foster system had lost everything, every connection to her past. And now here was her mother's face preserved in this barn for over 20 years. She pressed the photograph to her heart and wept. Samuel gave her space, wandering through the barn, examining the pieces with reverent hands. Clara didn't know how long she sat there, holding her mother's image, feeling the weight of everything she had lost and everything she had found. Finally, she wiped her eyes and stood. There was more to discover, more secrets to uncover. She found another letter tucked into the back of one of the journals. This one was addressed to her personally. "Clara, if you're reading this, you found my life's work. Our life's work. 4 generations of Bennett women creating beauty in secret because the world wasn't ready to see what we could do. Your great-great-grandmother Margaret started this tradition in 1920. Back then, women weren't supposed to be craftsmen, weren't supposed to create anything more complicated than a quilt or a pie. But Margaret didn't care. She taught herself woodworking and in secret sold her pieces under a man's name and built something that lasted. She passed the knowledge to her daughter, who passed it to me, who would have passed it to your mother if she had lived. Now I'm passing it to you. The crates contain pieces that have never been sold. Collectors have been begging me for decades. I kept them for you. Not because of the money, though there's plenty of that. I kept them because they're proof of who you are. You come from strong women, Clara. Women who created empires in secret. Women who refused to be limited by what the world expected of them. That strength is in your blood. It's in your daughter. Keep the pieces that speak to you. Sell the ones that don't. Use the moneyons to build a life for yourself and your child. But whatever you do, don't let Victor Harmon get his hands on this collection. He doesn't understand its value. He only sees dollar signs. He would scatter our legacy to the winds without a second thought. Protect it, Clara. Protect what we built. I love you, granddaughter. Forever yours, Grandma Eleanor. Clara read the letter twice, her hands shaking. Her daughter. Her grandmother had written her daughter. How had Eleanor known? She looked down at her swollen belly, at the child growing inside her. A girl. She was carrying a girl, and somehow her grandmother had known. The 5th generation of Bennett women. Clara felt something shift inside her, a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Victor Harmon wanted this collection. Wanted to sell it off piece by piece to the highest bidder. Wanted to destroy 100 years of women's history for profit. She wasn't going to let him. Samuel. Her voice was stronger now. I need to document everything in this barn. Every piece, every crate, every letter. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with. That could take weeks. Then we'd better get started. They worked until the sun began to set, pulling crates from shelves, photographing pieces, making lists. The scope of the collection was staggering. Over 400 individual carvings, 63 major furniture pieces, countless smaller items that defied categorization. And the letters. Hundreds of letters from collectors, dealers, museum curators, all begging for the chance to own a piece of Bennett craftsmanship. Clara did rough calculations based on the offers she found. Even at conservative estimates, the collection was worth at least $5 million. Maybe more. $5 million. She sat back on her heels, overwhelmed. This morning she had been a pregnant woman with $47 to her name. Now she was sitting on a fortune, but it wasn't really about the money, it was about the legacy. About the grandmother who had spent her life building something beautiful, hoping her granddaughter would someday find it. About the mother Clara had never known, whose face she now carried in her pocket. About the great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother whose names she was only just learning, whose work filled this barn, built a barn with proof of what women could accomplish when they refused to be limited. This was her birthright, her heritage, her family's gift to the world, and she was going to protect it with everything she had. That night, as Clara was preparing for bed, her phone rang. The number was blocked. Hello? Clara Bennett. A man's voice, but not Victor. Deeper, rougher. I know you're at the farm. I know you opened the barn. Clara's blood turned to ice. Who is this, Crows? Someone who knows what Eleanor was hiding. Someone who knows the truth about how she died. What are you talking about? She died in her sleep. A low laugh. Is that what they told you? Eleanor Bennett didn't die in her sleep, Clara. She was murdered, and if you're not careful, you're going to end up exactly the same way. The line went dead. Clara stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Murdered. Her grandmother had been murdered. She ran to find Samuel. He was in the kitchen washing dishes from their late dinner. Clara, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Someone just called me. Said my grandmother didn't die in her sleep. Said she was murdered. Samuel's face went pale. What? Who called you? I don't know. The number was blocked, but he knew I was here. Knew I opened the barn. Clara grabbed his arm. Samuel, is it true? Was Eleanor murdered? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he sank into a chair, looking older than he had all day. I don't know, but I've wondered. He rubbed his face with both hands. The night she died, I heard something. A car coming up the driveway around midnight. By the time I got outside to check, it was gone. The next morning, I found her in bed, peaceful as could be. The doctor said it was natural causes. Heart failure. But Clara... He met her eyes. Eleanor's heart was strong as an ox. I'd never known her to have any problems. Why didn't you tell anyone? Tell them what? That I heard a car, that I had a bad feeling, there was no evidence of foul play, no signs of a break-in, nothing. He shook his head. I thought I was being paranoid, but now... Clara felt cold all over. Her grandmother hadn't just left her a fortune, she had left her a target. Victor Harmon wanted this property, wanted it badly enough to threaten a pregnant woman, badly enough to claim Eleanor wasn't competent to change her will, badly enough to kill. She thought of his cold eyes, his entitled rage, his promise that accidents happen to pregnant women living alone. We need to call the police. And tell them what? That you got a threatening phone call that I heard a car 2 weeks ago. Samuel shook his head. They'll think we're crazy, or worse, they'll think we're making it up to help your case against Victor. So, then what do we do? Samuel stood and walked to the window, staring out at the barn. We protect what Eleanor built. We document everything, and we find out the truth about what happened to her. Clara joined him at the window. The barn was just a shadow now, its secrets hidden in darkness. Her grandmother had spent 40 years building something extraordinary, had spent 40 years waiting for Clara to come and claim it, had been killed possibly for refusing to let Victor Harmon destroy it. Clara pressed her hand against her belly, feeling her daughter kick. I'm not going to let them win, she whispered. I'm not going to let them take what's ours. The baby kicked again, as if in agreement. Outside, the wind picked up rustling through the trees like a whisper, like her grandmother's voice carrying across time. Protect it, Clara. Protect what we built. Clara squared her shoulders. She had come to this farm with nothing. She had found a legacy worth millions, a history worth preserving. A family she had never known existed, and someone was willing to kill to take it from her. But they had underestimated her. They had seen a pregnant woman alone, desperate, easy to intimidate. They didn't know that she had spent her entire life fighting to survive. Didn't know that she had grown up in a system designed to break her and had refused to be broken. They didn't know that she was a Bennett woman, and Bennett women didn't give up. Clara turned away from the window and looked at Samuel. Tomorrow I want to go through Eleanor's personal belongings, her papers, her correspondence, everything. If someone killed her, there has to be a reason. There has to be something she knew, something she was protecting beyond the collection. Samuel nodded slowly. There's a safe in her bedroom. I don't have the combination, but maybe the answer is in the barn. Clara thought of all the journals they had found, all the letters, all the secrets her grandmother had kept. She documented everything. If there's something dangerous in her past, she would have written about it. And if Victor is involved, Clara's jaw tightened, then I'll make sure he pays for what he did. She didn't sleep that night. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. She lay in her grandmother's bed with one hand on her belly and the other clutching the brass key, and she made a silent promise. To her grandmother, to her mother, to all the Bennett women who had come before her. She would uncover the truth. She would protect the legacy. She would make sure her daughter grew up knowing where she came from, knowing the strength that ran in her blood, no matter what it cost her. Outside, the wind continued to whisper through the trees, and somewhere in the darkness, Clara was certain someone was watching. The next morning came too quickly. Clara had barely slept. Her mind racing with questions that had no answers. She was in the kitchen by 6, searching through drawers and cabinets for anything her grandmother might have left behind. Samuel arrived at 7, his face grim. I made some calls last night, to some people I know in town, People who knew Eleanor. Clara stopped her search. And, "There's talk, Clara. Has been for weeks. Some folks think Eleanor's death wasn't natural. The doctor who signed her death certificate, a man named Dr. Howard Mills, he left town 3 days after she died. Nobody knows where he went." Clara felt her stomach drop. "He just disappeared. Sold his practice, packed up his house, and vanished. His receptionist said he got a large cash payment the day before he left. Wouldn't say where it came from." Victor. "Maybe, probably, but we can't prove it." Samuel sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "There's something else. I found this in the mailbox this morning." He handed her an envelope. No stamp, no return address, just her name written in block letters. Clara opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph. Her blood ran cold. It was a picture of her, taken yesterday, standing in front of the barn with Samuel beside her. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been close enough to take this photo without being seen. On the back, written in the same block letters, "Leave now or join your grandmother." Clara's hands shook so badly she dropped the photograph. Samuel picked it up and his face went white when he saw it. "We need to call the police, now." "And tell them that someone took my picture." Clara's voice was rising, panic mixing with anger. "They'll say I'm being paranoid. They'll say I'm making it up to help my case against Victor. This is a death threat, Clara. I know what it is." She pressed her hands against her belly, trying to calm herself. The baby was kicking frantically, responding to her distress. "I know, but think about it. Victor has money. He has connections. If he's behind this, if he really did have my grandmother killed, do you think the local police are going to help me, or are they going to bury the investigation just like they buried whatever happened to Eleanor?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "So what do you want to do?" Clara looked at the photograph on the table, at her own face captured without her knowledge by someone who wanted her dead. "I want to find out the truth, and I want to make whoever did this pay." By 9 o'clock, they were back in the barn searching through Eleanor's journals with new urgency. Clara had found 3 more addressed to her personally hidden in a locked drawer of the workbench. The key had been taped to the underside of the drawer above it, exactly where Eleanor said it would be in one of her earlier entries. The first journal was dated 15 years ago, when Samuel first came to work at the farm. Clara skimmed through the entries looking for anything that mentioned Victor, or danger, or fear. She found it on page 47. Victor came to the farm today. First time in 5 years. He wanted money, said he was in trouble, owed people who would hurt him if he didn't pay. I told him no. I've given him money before, thousands of dollars over the years, and it's never enough. He always comes back wanting more. He threatened me, said if I didn't help him, he would tell people about the collection, would bring reporters, collectors, anyone who would listen, would expose everything I've spent my life building. I told him to get off my property. He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. Samuel heard the commotion and came running. Victor left, but not before promising that he would get what was owed to him. One way or another, I'm scared. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely scared. Not of Victor himself, but of what he might do. He's desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. Clara looked up at Samuel. "Did you know about this? About Victor grabbing her?" Samuel nodded slowly. "She had bruises on her arm for weeks. Wouldn't tell me exactly what happened, but I knew it was him. That's when she got the restraining order. But he kept coming back. Not in person, but the phone calls never stopped. The letters, the threats." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I wanted to do something. Wanted to confront him myself. Eleanor wouldn't let me. Said it would only make things worse." Clara turned to the next journal, dated 10 years ago. The entries were more sporadic, but the fear was evident in every line. "Victor hired someone to follow me. I've seen the same car parked outside the property 3 times this week. A black sedan with tinted windows. I can't prove it's connected to him, but I know. I know. I've started keeping records of everything. Every threat, every suspicious occurrence, every piece of evidence that might someday prove what he's been doing. If something happens to me, I want Clara to know the truth. I want her to have the ammunition she needs to fight him." Clara's heart was pounding. She knew he might try to kill her, and she documented everything. "Where are those records?" "I don't know, she doesn't say." Clara flipped through more pages, searching for answers. "Wait, here, she mentions a safe, a hidden safe in the barn that only she knows about." Samuel frowned. "I've been in this barn hundreds of times. I've never seen a safe. Because she hid it. Listen to this." Clara read aloud from the journal. "I've moved the most important documents to the safe behind Margaret's cabinet. The one piece I'll never sell because it marks the spot where our family's secrets are kept. The combination is the date Sarah was born. My beautiful Sarah. My beautiful daughter. Clara's mother, Sarah. When was your mother born? Samuel asked. I don't know. I never knew anything about her until yesterday. Clara felt tears threatening but pushed them back. There has to be a record somewhere. A birth certificate, something. They searched for 2 hours before Clara found it. A folder in the file cabinet labeled simply, Sarah. Inside was everything. Birth certificate, school records, photographs from childhood through adulthood, and finally, a death certificate. Sarah Elizabeth Bennett. Born March 15, 1975. Died August 22, 1999. Clara stared at the death certificate, her hands trembling. Her mother had been 24 when she died, the same age Clara was now. She was so young, Clara whispered. What does it say? The cause of death? Clara read the words and the world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Car accident, single vehicle, driver lost control on a mountain road. She looked up at Samuel, horror dawning in her eyes. Samuel, the accident happened just 3 miles from here, on the road that leads to Victor Harmon's house. The implication hung in the air, between them too terrible to speak aloud. Clara's mother hadn't just died in an accident. She had died on Victor Harmon's road, and now Victor wanted the farm that should have been Sarah's inheritance. The farm that was now Clara's. We need to find that safe, Clara said, her voice hard. Now. Margaret's cabinet stood in the far corner of the barn, covered with a dusty cloth that hadn't been disturbed in years. It was the oldest piece in the collection, dating back to 1923 according to the tag attached to its base. The craftsmanship was extraordinary even by Bennett standards. Hand-carved panels depicting scenes of women working, creating, building. A celebration of female strength hidden in plain sight for 100 years. Clara and Samuel moved the cabinet carefully inch by inch until they could see the wall behind it. At first there was nothing, just old wooden planks like everywhere else in the barn. But Clara remembered her grandmother's words. The one piece I'll never sell because it marks the spot. She ran her hands over the wood, searching for anything unusual. Her fingers found a slight gap between 2 planks, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. Here, there's something here. Samuel handed her a crowbar and Clara pried carefully at the planks. They came away more easily than expected, revealing a small metal door set into the wall. A combination safe just as Eleanor had described. March 15, 1975. Clara entered the numbers with shaking hands. The safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and a small leather journal Clara had never seen before. She pulled everything out and spread it across the workbench, her heart racing. The first document she picked up was a police report from 1999. Her mother's accident. But as Clara read the details, her confusion grew. The responding officer had noted several inconsistencies, skid marks that didn't match the official narrative, damage to the vehicle that suggested another car had been involved, witness statements that were never followed up. This wasn't an accident, Clara breathed. Someone ran her off the road. Who? Clara found another document, a private investigator's report hired by Eleanor 6 months after Sarah's death. Subject Vicomte Victor Harmon. The investigation has confirmed that Victor Harmon was in the vicinity at the time of Sarah Bennett's death. His vehicle, a black pickup truck, was seen on the same road approximately 30 minutes before the accident. Damage consistent with a side collision was observed on the truck's front bumper 2 days after the incident. The damage was repaired at a shop in Burlington, paid for in cash. Conclusion: there is significant circumstantial evidence suggesting Victor Harmon was involved in Sarah Bennett's death. However, without physical evidence or witnesses willing to testify, prosecution is unlikely. Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. Victor Harmon had killed her mother, had killed her own grandmother, and now he was coming for her. 25 years, Clara's voice broke. She knew for 25 years that Victor killed her daughter and she couldn't do anything about it, couldn't prove it, couldn't get justice. But she documented everything, Samuel said quietly. She gathered evidence, she waited. Waited for what? Samuel picked up the leather journal and opened it to the first page. I think she was waiting for you. The journal was dated 6 months ago, the same time Eleanor had changed her will. I've made my decision. Clara is coming home. I've arranged everything, the will, the money, the documents she'll need to destroy Victor once and for all. I know he'll try to stop her. I know he might try to kill her like he killed Sarah, but Clara is stronger than she knows. She's survived things that would have broken most people. She'll survive this too, and she'll have weapons I never had, the evidence I've gathered, the truth about what Victor did. the fortune he's been trying to steal for 40 years. I only wish I could be there to see his face when he realizes he's lost. When he understands that the granddaughter he underestimated is going to be his destruction. I love you, Clara. Fight for us. Fight for your mother. Fight for all the Bennett women who came before you. We're counting on you. Clara closed the journal and pressed it against her chest. Her grandmother had planned this. Had spent months preparing knowing she might not survive to see Clara arrive. Had left her everything she needed to finally get justice for her mother's death. I'm going to destroy him, Clara said, her voice steady for the first time since finding the threat in the mailbox. I'm going to take everything he has and make sure he pays for what he did. How? Clara looked at the documents spread across the workbench. 25 years of evidence. Police reports, private investigator findings, financial records, witness statements. Everything Eleanor had gathered waiting for the right moment. I'm going to need a lawyer, a good one, someone Victor can't buy or intimidate. I might know someone. Samuel pulled out his phone. My niece Patricia. She's a prosecutor in Burlington, handles major crimes. She owes me a favor. Call her. By noon, Clara was sitting across from Patricia Torres in a coffee shop in Burlington. Patricia was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with the kind of confidence that came from years of putting criminals behind bars. Let me make sure I understand, Patricia said, flipping through the documents Clara had brought. You're claiming Victor Harmon killed your mother 25 years ago, killed your grandmother 2 weeks ago, and is now threatening to kill you. I'm not claiming anything, the evidence claims it. Patricia studied her for a long moment. You know this isn't enough for an arrest. It's circumstantial at best. I know, but it's enough to start an investigation, enough to make Victor nervous. Clara leaned forward. And there's more. The doctor who signed my grandmother's death certificate disappeared 3 days later. Left town with a large cash payment. If you find him, if you can get him to talk, that's a big if. Everything about this case is a big if. But my grandmother spent 25 years gathering evidence because she knew someday there would be an opportunity. That opportunity is now. Victor is getting desperate. He's making mistakes. The threat he sent me this morning proves it. Patricia picked up the photograph, the one showing Clara and Samuel at the barn. This was hand-delivered. Left in my mailbox overnight. Which means someone was on your property, trespassing. That's something we can actually work with. Patricia made a note. I'll send a deputy to take your statement officially, and I'll make some calls about Durr Mills. See if anyone knows where he went. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Even if we find evidence of foul play, Victor Harmon has money and lawyers. Cases like this take years to prosecute, and there's no guarantee of conviction. I don't need a conviction right now. I just need him to know I'm fighting back. Need him to understand that I'm not the easy target he thought I was. Tss. Patricia smiled for the first time. You know, when Samuel called me this morning, I thought this was going to be a waste of my time. Some scared pregnant woman making accusations she couldn't back up. She gathered the documents and placed them carefully in her briefcase. I was wrong. You're exactly what your grandmother said you would be. Clara's heart skipped. You knew my grandmother. Met her once about 5 years ago. She came to my office wanting to know how to build a case against someone without going to the police. Wouldn't tell me who or why. Just wanted information. Patricia met Clara's eyes. She said someday her granddaughter would need help and she wanted to make sure she'd have it. Asked me to remember the name Clara Bennett. Tears blurred Clara's vision. Even from beyond the grave, Eleanor was still protecting her. She was an extraordinary woman, Patricia continued. The kind of woman who plans 20 steps ahead and never shows her hand until she's ready to win. I think you might be the same. Clara drove back to the farm alone. Samuel had stayed in town to handle some errands, promising to return before dark. The mountain roads twisted and turned, and Clara found herself thinking about her mother driving this same route 25 years ago, not knowing she would never make it home. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't see the black truck until it was too late. It appeared in her rearview mirror, gaining fast. Too fast for these winding roads. Clara pressed the accelerator, her heart hammering, but the truck kept coming. Closer. Closer. The first impact came without warning. The truck slammed into her rear bumper, sending her car fishtailing across the road. Clara screamed, fighting the wheel, struggling to regain control. The second impact was harder. Her car spun tires, screeching, and for one terrifying moment she was heading straight for the guardrail, for the steep drop beyond. She jerked the wheel at the last second and the car careened back onto the road. The truck was still behind her, still coming, but there was a turnoff ahead, a narrow dirt road that led to a neighbor's property. Clara took it without slowing down, praying her rental car could handle the rough terrain. The truck followed for 100 yards, then stopped. Through her rearview mirror, Clara saw it idling at the junction, waiting. She didn't stop driving until she reached the neighbor's house, a small farmhouse with a pickup truck parked outside. An elderly man came out onto the porch as she pulled up her car, covered in dust and her hands still shaking. "You all right, miss? You look like you've seen the devil himself." "Someone just tried to run me off the road." Clara's voice was trembling. "Can I use your phone? I need to call the police." The man, who introduced himself as Harold Perkins, led her inside and handed her his landline. Clara called Patricia directly. "Someone tried to kill me, a black truck, on the mountain road about 3 miles from the farm." "Are you hurt?" "No, I managed to get away. But Patricia, this is the same road where my mother died, the same road." Silence on the other end. "Then stay where you are. I'm sending deputies now. Don't go anywhere alone until they arrive." Clara hung up and sank into Harold's worn couch, her arms wrapped around her belly. The baby was kicking frantically, as if she could sense the danger they had just escaped. "Victor Harmon," Harold said quietly. "That's who's after you, isn't it?" Clara looked up, startled. "How did you know?" "Everyone in this valley knows Victor Harmon. Knows what kind of man he is." Harold sat down across from her, his weathered face grim. "I was friends with your grandmother, you know, Eleanor. She used to bring me vegetables from her garden, and I'd give her eggs from my chickens. Good woman, strong woman." He paused. "She told me about a year ago that her granddaughter was coming someday. Asked me to keep an eye out for you. Said you might need help." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks. "She told everyone, didn't she, made sure I'd have people looking out for me even after she was gone." That's the kind of woman Eleanor was, always thinking ahead, always protecting the people she loved. Harold leaned forward. "She also told me something else. Said if anything happened to her, I should tell you to look in the root cellar. Said you'd know what it meant." Clara's heart stopped. "The root cellar at the farm." "That's what she said. Didn't explain. Just said you'd understand when the time came." The deputies arrived 20 minutes later, took Clara's statement, and escorted her back to the farm. Samuel was already there, pacing the porch, his face gray with worry. "I heard what happened. Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're fine, shaken up, but fine." Clara let him help her inside, her legs still unsteady. "Samuel, do you know about a root cellar on this property?" He frowned. "There's an old one behind the house. Eleanor never used it, said it was too damp for storage. Why? Because she told Harold Perkins to tell me to look there. Said I'd understand." They went together, Clara and Samuel, with 2 deputies following at a distance. The root cellar was exactly where Samuel said, a heavy wooden door set into a small hill behind the farmhouse. The lock was rusted but intact, and the brass key from Eleanor's collection fit perfectly. Inside the cellar was cool and dark, smelling of earth and age. Samuel's flashlight revealed stone walls, empty shelves, and at the very back, a wooden trunk Clara had never seen before. She knelt beside it, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward, and lifted the lid. Inside was money. Stacks and stacks of cash bundled with rubber bands. $100 bills, thousands of them, filling the trunk nearly to the top. Clara couldn't breathe. "How much is this?" Samuel picked up one bundle, then another, his eyes wide. "I don't know. Hundreds of thousands, maybe more." Beneath the money was an envelope with Clara's name on it. She opened it with numb fingers. "Clara, if you found this, things have gotten dangerous. This money is for emergencies, for lawyers, for whatever you need to fight Victor and win. It's cash because I didn't want it traced. Didn't want Victor's lawyers to tie it up in court. Use it wisely. Protect yourself and my great-granddaughter. And remember what I told you. The truth is in the barn. All of it. Every secret, every crime, every piece of evidence you need to destroy Victor Harmon. But be careful. He's more dangerous than you know. I love you. Grandma Eleanor." Clara looked at Samuel, her mind racing. "She said all the evidence is in the barn, but we've already searched the barn. We found the journals, the police reports, the investigators' files. Maybe there's more, something we missed. Or something she hid even better than the safe." Clara struggled to her feet, her determination renewed. "We need to search again, every inch, every piece of furniture, every crate, every floorboard. Clara, you need to rest. After what happened today..." "I'll rest when Victor Harmon is in prison." She met his eyes and her voice was steel. "My grandmother spent 25 years building this case. My mother died because of that man. I'm not stopping until I find everything she left for me." They searched until midnight. Clara refused to quit even when her back ached and her feet swelled. Samuel worked beside her, methodical and thorough, checking every piece for hidden compartments, every drawer for false bottoms. It was Clara who found it. In the child-sized rocking chair Mia had wanted to sit in that first day. The chair her grandmother had carved for the granddaughter she hoped would someday come. The seat lifted out to reveal a hidden compartment beneath, and inside that compartment was a small digital recorder with a note attached. "Play this, then take it to the police." Clara pressed play with trembling fingers. Victor Harmon's voice filled the barn, recorded without his knowledge, clear as day. "Listen to me, you old witch. I know you've been gathering evidence against me. I know you think you can destroy me, but you're wrong. I'm going to take that farm one way or another. And if you don't hand it over willingly, I'll do what I did to your precious daughter. I'll make it look like an accident, and no one will ever know the difference." Eleanor's voice came next, calm and steady, despite the threat. "Are you admitting you killed Sarah Victor? Are you saying you murdered my daughter? I'm saying accidents happen. They happen to Sarah. They can happen to you, and they can happen to that granddaughter you think I don't know about." A cruel laugh. "Yeah, I know about Clara. Know where she lives, know she's pregnant, know she's one eviction notice away from being homeless. Easy target, just like her mother was." The recording ended. Clara was crying. Tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with rage and grief, and something that felt almost like triumph. "He confessed," she whispered. "On tape. He confessed to killing my mother and threatening to kill me and Eleanor." Samuel looked at her with tears in his own eyes. "Your grandmother got him. After 25 years, she finally got him." Clara clutched the recorder to her chest. This was it, the weapon her grandmother had been building for a quarter century. The evidence that would finally bring Victor Harmon to justice. "I need to call Patricia, right now." She made the call, her hands still shaking. Patricia answered on the first ring. "Clara, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything is right." Clara took a deep breath. "I found a recording. Victor Harmon confessing to my mother's murder, threatening my grandmother, threatening me." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" "I just played it. It's clear as day. His voice, his words, everything. Don't let anyone else touch it. Don't make copies. Don't tell anyone except me." Patricia's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "I'm coming to the farm first thing in the morning. If this is what you say it is, we can arrest him by tomorrow night." Clara hung up and looked at Samuel. The recorder felt warm in her hand, like it was alive, like it contained her grandmother's spirit reaching out from beyond the grave. "We did it," she said. "We found everything she left for us." But even as she spoke, she knew it wasn't over. Victor Harmon was still out there, still dangerous, still capable of doing anything to protect himself, and he had already proven twice today that he was willing to kill to get what he wanted. Clara pressed her hand against her belly, feeling her daughter kick. "Just a little longer," she whispered. "Just hold on a little longer, and then we'll be safe. All of us. Forever." The wind howled outside the barn, and somewhere in the darkness a car engine started. Clara didn't hear it over the pounding of her own heart, but she would. Soon enough she would hear everything, and by then it might be too late. 3:47 in the morning. Clara woke to the sound of breaking glass. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding her hand, instinctively moving to protect her belly. The house was dark except for the moonlight, streaming through the curtains. Another crash. Downstairs. Someone was inside. Clara grabbed her phone and the digital recorder she had kept under her pillow since finding it. She dialed 911 with shaking fingers as she moved toward the bedroom door. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's breaking into my house, Willowbrook Farm on Route 7. Please hurry. Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are being dispatched. Clara pressed herself against the wall, listening. Footsteps on the stairs, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. "He's coming upstairs," she whispered into the phone. "Please, you have to hurry." The footsteps stopped outside her door. Clara held her breath, her entire body trembling. The recorder was clutched in her hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The door exploded inward. Victor Harmon stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage, a crowbar in his hand. "Did you really think I was going to let you destroy me? Did you really think I was going to let you walk into my family's legacy and take everything as we would? The police are on their way, Victor. Then I'd better make this quick." He stepped into the room, raising the crowbar. "Give me the recorder. I know Eleanor made one. I know she recorded our conversations. Give it to me, and maybe I'll let you live." Clara backed toward the window, her phone still connected to 911. You're being recorded right now, Victor. Everything you say is being heard by the police dispatcher. He froze. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then the rage returned hotter than before. I don't care. By the time they get here, you'll be dead and the recorder will be destroyed. Another tragic accident. A pregnant woman falling down the stairs in the middle of the night. Like my mother. Like my grandmother. Your mother was a mistake. She was supposed to be scared, not dead. The road was wet and I pushed too hard. Victor laughed a cold, empty sound. But Eleanor, I planned. Paid that useless doctor $50,000 to sign whatever I told him to sign. Easiest murder I ever committed. Clara felt sick. He was confessing. Confessing to everything, while the 911 dispatcher listened. Why? She asked, forcing the word past the terror in her throat. Why did you want this farm so badly? Because it should have been mine, Victor's voice rose to a shout. My father was the one who found this land. My father was the one who gave Eleanor the money to buy it, and she repaid him by cutting our entire family out of her will, said the farm belonged to Bennett women only, said men couldn't be trusted with what they'd built. So you killed her daughter to punish her. I killed her daughter because Sarah was going to expose me. She found out about my debts, about the people I owed money to. She was going to tell Eleanor, and Eleanor would have destroyed me. Victor's grip tightened on the crowbar. I couldn't let that happen, so I made sure Sarah never made it home that night. Tears streamed down Clara's face. Her mother had died trying to protect the family. Had died because Victor couldn't stand to be held accountable for his failures. And now you're going to kill me too. Kill your own cousin's daughter. Kill an innocent baby. You're not innocent. You're standing between me and what's rightfully mine. Victor raised the crowbar again. Last chance, Clara. Give me the recorder. Clara looked at the window behind her. One story drop, onto grass. Maybe she could survive it. Maybe the baby could survive it. Or maybe she could stall long enough for the police to arrive. The recorder isn't here, she said. I gave it to the prosecutor this afternoon, Patricia Torres. She's already heard everything. Even if you kill me, it won't matter. The evidence is already with the police. Victor's face went pale. You're lying. Am I? Patricia called me 2 hours ago, said she'd already started the paperwork for your arrest warrant, said you'd be in custody by morning. Clara forced herself to meet his eyes to show no fear, even though terror was clawing at her chest. It's over, Victor. You lost. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Clara could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Victor heard them too. His expression shifted from rage to calculation to something that looked almost like despair. Then I have nothing left to lose. He swung the crowbar. Clara threw herself to the side, and the crowbar smashed into the wall where her head had been. She scrambled across the bed, trying to reach the door, but Victor was faster. He grabbed her ankle and pulled her back, his fingers digging into her flesh. You should have taken the money, he snarled. You should have walked away when you had the chance. Clara kicked out with her free foot, catching him in the jaw. He released her with a grunt of pain, and she rolled off the bed, landing hard on her hands and knees. The impact sent a jolt through her belly, and she gasped as the baby kicked frantically. Please, she begged. Please, not my baby. You can have the farm. You can have everything. Just don't hurt my baby. Victor stood over her, the crowbar raised his nose, bleeding from where she had kicked him. Too late for bargains, Clara. Too late for anything. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Victor staggered backward, the crowbar falling from his hand. He looked down at his chest, at the blood spreading across his expensive shirt, and then he looked up with an expression of pure shock. Samuel stood in the doorway, a hunting rifle in his hands, his face harder than Clara had ever seen it. Get away from her, Victor. I won't miss twice. Victor tried to speak, but only blood came out. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto his face. The sirens were right outside now, red and blue lights flashing through the window. Samuel rushed to Clara's side, helping her up. Are you hurt? Is the baby hurt? I don't know. Clara was shaking so hard she could barely stand. He was going to kill me. He confessed to everything. My mother, my grandmother, everything. I heard. I was outside when I heard the glass break, grabbed my rifle, and came as fast as I could. Samuel held her steady as footsteps thundered up the stairs. The police are here. You're safe now. Both of you are safe. Deputy Martinez was the first through the door, his weapon drawn. He took in the scene in an instant, Victor bleeding on the floor, Samuel holding the rifle, Clara clutching her belly. We need an ambulance, Clara gasped. I'm pregnant. I fell. Everything after that was a blur. Paramedics arrived and loaded Victor onto a stretcher. He was still alive barely, but Clara couldn't bring herself to care. Another team checked her, and the baby ran tests, listened to the heartbeat. "The baby's fine," the paramedic said finally. "Strong heartbeat, good movement. You're both going to be okay." Clara started crying and couldn't stop. Relief and terror and grief all mixed together, pouring out of her in waves she couldn't control. Patricia Torres arrived at 6 in the morning. By then, Clara had been moved to the living room, wrapped in blankets, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Samuel sat beside her, refusing to leave. "Victor's in surgery," Patricia said, sitting down across from them. "He's probably going to survive. The bullet missed his heart by about an inch." "Good," Clara said, her voice hollow. "I want him to stand trial. I want everyone to know what he did." "They will. The 911 dispatcher recorded everything. His confession, his threats, all of it." Patricia pulled out a notepad. "Combined with the recording Eleanor made and the evidence we've already gathered, we have more than enough to charge him with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder." Samuel let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "It's really over. It's really over." Patricia looked at Clara with something like admiration. "Your grandmother would be proud of you. She spent 25 years building this case, and you closed it in less than a week." Clara shook her head. "She did all the work. I just found what she left behind." "That's not true, and you know it. Eleanor gathered the evidence, but you're the one who stood up to Victor. You're the one who faced him down even when he was threatening to kill you." Patricia leaned forward. "That takes a kind of courage most people never have to find." Clara looked down at her belly at the daughter growing inside her. "I didn't have a choice. I had to protect her. Had to protect everything my grandmother built." "And you did? Both?" The next few days passed in a haze. Clara gave statements to the police, met with lawyers, fielded calls from reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the story. Victor remained in the hospital, under guard, too injured to be moved to a jail cell, but already formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. Dr. Howard Mills was found in a motel in Florida, living under a false name. When confronted with the evidence Patricia's team had gathered, he broke down and confessed everything. Victor had paid him $100,000 to sign Eleanor's death certificate without performing a proper examination. Had threatened his family if he ever talked. The doctor was charged as an accessory to murder. He agreed to testify against Victor in exchange for a reduced sentence. 4 days after the attack, Clara stood in the barn again. The sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating the collection her grandmother had spent a lifetime creating. Samuel stood beside her, silent, letting her process everything that had happened. "I almost died in this house," Clara said quietly. "I almost let Victor take everything. But you didn't. Because of you. Because you were there with that rifle." Samuel shook his head. "I just pulled the trigger. You're the one who survived. You're the one who found the evidence, who stood up to him, who refused to back down even when he was swinging that crowbar at your head." Clara ran her hand over the surface of a table her great-great-grandmother had made. 100 years of history encoded in wood and craftsmanship and love. "What do I do now with all of this? Whatever you want. It's yours. Your grandmother made sure of that." Clara thought about the collection, about the millions of dollars it was worth, about the legacy it represented 4 generations of Bennett women who had created beauty in secret because the world wasn't ready to see what they could do. "I want to share it," she said finally. "Not sell it, not scatter it to collectors who will hide it away in private homes. I want people to see what Bennett women built. I want the world to know their names." Samuel smiled. Eleanor would have liked that. Would she? She kept it secret her whole life. Because she didn't have a choice. The world wasn't ready when Margaret started carving. Wasn't ready when Evelyn continued the tradition. By the time it might have been ready, Eleanor was too private, too protective of what she'd built. Samuel put a hand on her shoulder. "But you're different, Clara. You grew up in a world that's starting to value women's contributions. You can do what Eleanor never could." Clara looked around the barn at the hundreds of pieces, each one a testament to female creativity and determination. "A museum," she said, "or a foundation, something that preserves the collection and tells the story of the women who made it." "That's a big undertaking." "I know, but I've got money now, and time, and a daughter who's going to grow up knowing exactly where she comes from." The first journalist arrived 2 weeks later. Clara had agreed to one interview with a reporter from the New York Times who had written extensively about women artists whose work had been overlooked or attributed to men. The resulting article ran on the front page of the arts section, complete with photographs of the collection and quotes from art historians who declared it one of the most significant discoveries in decades. The phone started ringing immediately. Museum curators, gallery owners, collectors, documentary filmmakers. Everyone wanted access to the Bennett collection. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Clara said no to all of them, at least for now. "I need time," she told Patricia during one of their weekly calls. "Time to catalog everything properly. Time to have the baby. Time to figure out what kind of legacy I want to build." "That's smart. Don't let anyone rush you into decisions you might regret." "I won't." Clara paused. "Any news on Victor's case?" "His lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal. They know they can't win at trial, not with Eleanor's recording and the 911 tape and Dr. Mills's testimony. They're hoping for life without parole instead of the death penalty." Clara felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no relief. Just emptiness where she had expected something more. "Whatever the courts decide is fine with me. I just want it to be over." "It will be. Soon. I promise." 3 weeks after the attack, Clara went into labor. It was 2 weeks early, and for a terrifying moment she was afraid something was wrong. But the doctors assured her that early labor was common after trauma, and the baby was healthy, just eager to meet the world. The delivery took 14 hours. Samuel stayed in the waiting room the entire time, refusing to leave even when the nurses suggested he go home and rest. Mrs. Patterson had flown in from Detroit 2 days earlier, insisting she wasn't going to miss the birth of her favorite neighbor's baby. At 3:47 in the morning, exactly 1 month after Victor Harmon had broken into her house, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Eleanor Rose Bennett, after the grandmother who had saved her life and the flower that bloomed every spring in the gardens of Willowbrook Farm. Samuel was the first person Clara allowed into the room after the birth. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at her and the baby, and when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "She looks like your grandmother. Same eyes, same stubborn chin." Clara laughed weakly. "Is that a compliment or a warning?" "Both." Samuel walked to the bedside and looked down at the tiny face nestled against Clara's chest. "Hello, little Eleanor. Welcome to the world." The baby opened her eyes and Clara's breath caught. They were blue like all newborn eyes, but there was something in them. Something knowing. Something ancient. "She's the 6th generation," Clara whispered. "The 6th Bennett woman. My grandmother said the strength was in my blood, in my daughter's blood." "It is. I can see it already." Clara held her daughter close, breathing in the newborn scent of her, feeling the weight of responsibility and love and hope all mixed together. This tiny person was depending on her. This tiny person was the reason she had fought so hard, risked so much, refused to give up, even when everything seemed impossible. "I'm going to tell her everything," Clara said, "when she's old enough, about Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah, about the collection and the legacy and the sacrifices they all made. I want her to know where she comes from. She'll know. Every time she walks into that barn, she'll know." Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Is that her? Is that the baby?" Clara smiled. "Come meet Eleanor Rose." The older woman rushed to the bedside, cooing over the baby, with the expertise of someone who had raised 4 children of her own. "Oh, she's perfect. Absolutely perfect. Look at those little fingers." "Thank you for coming," Clara said, "for everything you did back in Detroit. I never would have made it without you." "Nonsense. You would have found a way. You're the strongest person I've ever met." Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes. "Your grandmother knew it. That's why she left everything to you. She knew you were the one who could protect it." Clara looked at her daughter, at the old woman who had become like family at Samuel, who had saved her life and felt something she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. She felt like she belonged. Victor Harmon's trial began 3 months later. Clara attended every day, sitting in the front row with Eleanor Rose in her arms and Samuel at her side. She watched as the evidence was presented, as the recordings were played, as witness after witness testified about Victor's crimes. On the 5th day of the trial, the prosecution played Eleanor's recording. The courtroom fell silent as Victor's voice filled the room, confessing to murder, making threats revealing the depths of his greed and cruelty. Clara watched him as he listened. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. He had lost weight in prison, and the expensive suits had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. He looked like a man who knew he was finished. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Clara didn't cry when the verdict was read. She simply held her daughter closer and whispered, "We did it, Eleanor. We got justice for your great-grandmother, for your grandmother, for all of them." The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Victor would die behind bars surrounded by concrete and guards, and the knowledge that everything he had done had been for nothing. Clara gave a victim impact statement before the judge pronounced sentence. She spoke about her mother, the woman she had never known, about her grandmother, the woman who had loved her from afar for 24 years, about the legacy of Bennett women that Victor had tried to destroy. He thought he could take everything from us, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. He thought money and threats and violence could break what 4 generations of women built, but he was wrong. The Bennett legacy is stronger than one man's greed. It will outlast him. It will outlast all of us. Victor didn't look at her as she spoke, didn't look at anyone. He sat hunched in his chair, a broken man who had gambled everything and lost. After the trial, life settled into a new rhythm. Clara threw herself into the work of preserving and cataloging the collection. She hired experts to assess each piece, historians to research the lives of the Bennett women archivists to preserve the journals and letters and photographs. She established the Bennett Women's Foundation, dedicated to supporting female artists and craftspeople. The collection would eventually be displayed in a permanent exhibition at a major museum, but first it would tour the country, bringing the story of Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah to people who had never heard of them. The first exhibition opened on what would have been Eleanor's 85th birthday. Clara stood at the entrance of the gallery, Eleanor Rose in her arms, and watched as hundreds of people streamed through to see the collection. "Your great-great-great-grandmother made this," she whispered to her daughter, pointing to Margaret's first documented piece, a small carved horse that had started everything. She taught herself woodworking in 1920, when women weren't supposed to create anything more complicated than a pie. She changed everything, for all of us. Eleanor Rose reached out her tiny hand toward the carving, and Clara smiled. "Someday when you're older, I'll teach you too, if you want to learn. The legacy doesn't have to end with us." Patricia Torres found her later standing in front of the cabinet that had hidden the safe for so many years. "It's incredible," Patricia said. "I've been to a lot of art exhibitions, but I've never felt anything like this. You can feel the history in every piece. That's what my grandmother wanted, for people to understand what Bennett women were capable of, for the world to finally see what they created in secret all those years. She would be so proud of you, Clara, of everything you've accomplished." Clara looked at the portrait of Eleanor that hung at the entrance to the exhibition. An old photograph taken when she was young and strong, standing in front of the barn with a carving tool in her hand. "I hope so. I hope she knows that it wasn't for nothing. All those years she spent watching me from afar, saving money, gathering evidence, building a legacy she hoped I would someday find. I hope she knows it all meant something." "It meant everything. You're living proof of that." That night, after the exhibition closed and the guests went home, Clara drove back to Willowbrook Farm. The farmhouse was lit up warm and welcoming, and smoke curled from the chimney, where Samuel had started a fire to ward off the autumn chill. She carried Eleanor Rose inside and settled her in the nursery that had once been her grandmother's bedroom. The quilt that smelled of lavender and cedar now draped over the crib, and photographs of 4 generations of Bennett women lined the walls. Clara stood there for a long time watching her daughter sleep, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been homeless and desperate, counting down to eviction with $47 in her bank account. Now she had a home, a family, a legacy worth millions, and a daughter who would grow up knowing exactly who she was and where she came from. "Thank you," Clara whispered to the empty room, to her grandmother, to her mother, to all the Bennett women who had come before her. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for leaving me everything I needed to find my way." The wind rustled through the trees outside, and Clara could almost hear her grandmother's voice in the sound. "You were always strong enough, Clara. You just needed to believe it." She went downstairs to the kitchen, where Samuel had left a pot of soup warming on the stove. Through the window, she could see the barn, its massive doors standing open, now no longer hiding secrets. Tomorrow she would go back to work, would continue the never-ending task of preserving and sharing the Bennett legacy, would raise her daughter and teach her the family history, and maybe someday pass down the craft that had been in their blood for 100 years. But tonight she was just going to rest, to eat soup and sit by the fire and feel for the first time in her life truly at home. Clara Bennett had come to Willowbrook Farm with nothing. She had found a fortune, a heritage, a family she never knew existed. She had faced down a killer and survived. She had taken everything her grandmother left her and turned it into something even greater. And this was only the beginning. The brass key still sat on her nightstand, tarnished with age but shining in the lamplight. The key that had opened the barn. The key that had opened her future. Clara picked it up and held it in her hand, feeling its familiar weight. Someday she would give it to Eleanor Rose, would tell her the story of the farm and the barn and the secret that had been kept for 100 years. But for now, she just held it close and let herself feel grateful. for her grandmother's love, for her daughter's future, for the legacy that would live on long after she was gone. The Bennett women had built something extraordinary, and Clara was just getting started. 6 months had passed since Victor Harmon's conviction. Clara had just put Eleanor Rose down for her afternoon nap when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made her answer. "Is this Clara Bennett? Who's asking?" "My name is Daniel Whitmore. My grandmother was Margaret Whitmore, one of Eleanor Bennett's most devoted collectors." The voice paused. "I'm calling because I found something in my grandmother's estate that I think belongs to you." Clara's heart skipped. Margaret Whitmore, the woman who had offered $50,000 for the Wolf pair. "What did you find?" "Letters, dozens of them dating back to 1952, correspondence between my grandmother and yours. But there's something else." Another pause. "Miss Bennett, I think your family history is more complicated than you know. I think there are secrets Eleanor never told anyone, not even in those journals you found." Clara gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of secrets?" "The kind that could change everything you thought you knew about the Bennett women. Can we meet? I'm in Vermont for the week. I can come to the farm tomorrow if you're willing." Clara agreed before she could talk herself out of it. When she hung up, her hands were shaking. More secrets. More revelations. Just when she thought she had uncovered everything her grandmother left behind. She called Samuel immediately. "Someone named Daniel Whitmore just contacted me. Says he has letters between his grandmother and mine. Says there are secrets Eleanor never revealed." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Margaret Whitmore was one of Eleanor's oldest friends. They corresponded for over 50 years. If anyone knew Eleanor's secrets, it would have been her. "Should I be worried?" "I don't know, but I'll be there when he comes. Whatever he has to say, you won't face it alone." Daniel Whitmore arrived at 10 the next morning. He was in his 50s, well-dressed, with kind eyes that reminded Clara of her grandmother's lawyer. He carried a leather briefcase that looked old and well-worn. "Thank you for seeing me," he said as Clara led him into the living room. Samuel was already there, positioned by the fireplace like a guardian. "I've said you found letters." "I did. My grandmother passed away 3 months ago. She left me her estate, including a collection of Eleanor Bennett's work that she had been assembling for decades." Daniel set the briefcase on the coffee table and opened it carefully. "But she also left me this." He pulled out a thick bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. "These are letters between Margaret Whitmore and Eleanor Bennett starting in 1952 and continuing until just a few months before Eleanor's death." Daniel's expression grew serious. "Miss Bennett, have you ever heard the name Thomas Reed?" Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "That name was on the back of a photograph I found in the barn. Eleanor standing with a man. The face was scratched out." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thomas Reed was your grandfather, Eleanor's husband." The room seemed to tilt. Clara grabbed the arm of the chair to steady herself. "Her husband! She was married. For 7 years, from 1960 to 1967. He was the love of her life, according to these letters. But something happened. Something terrible." Daniel pulled a specific letter from the bundle. "This is dated August 1967, a month before your mother was born." Clara took the letter with trembling hands and began to read. "Dearest Margaret, I don't know how to write these words. I don't know how to make them real. Thomas is gone. Not dead, though perhaps that would be easier. He left. Walked out 2 weeks ago and hasn't come back. He found out about the collection. Found out I had been selling pieces under a man's name building a fortune he knew nothing about. He called me a liar, a deceiver. Said he couldn't be married to a woman who kept secrets. The irony would be laughable if it didn't break my heart. I kept secrets because I had to, because no one would buy woodwork from a woman, because the world we live in doesn't allow women to be creators, to be artists, to be anything more than wives and mothers. I'm pregnant, Margaret. 7 months along with our first child. A girl, the doctor says, and now I'm alone. Thomas took half our savings and disappeared. I don't know where he went. Don't know if I'll ever see him again. I hate him for leaving, but I hate myself more for not telling him the truth sooner, for not trusting him enough to share my real life. Sarah will never know her father, and perhaps that's for the best. Perhaps it's better to have no father than one who would abandon his pregnant wife over wounded pride. I'm going to raise her alone, Margaret. I'm going to teach her everything I know, and I'm going to make sure she never has to hide who she is the way I did. The Bennett women will survive this. We always do. Your heartbroken friend Eleanor Clara couldn't breathe. Her grandfather hadn't died. He had abandoned his pregnant wife because he couldn't handle her success. Had walked out on Eleanor and Sarah over bruised ego. There's more, Daniel said gently. Thomas Reed didn't just disappear. He went to California, started a new family, had 3 more children. He pulled out another document. Miss Bennett, you have aunts and uncles you never knew existed, half-siblings to your mother. Clara's world was spinning. She had thought she was alone, had spent her entire life believing she had no family, and now she was discovering that her grandfather had simply chosen to create a new family rather than stay with the one he had. Why are you telling me this? Because Thomas Reed died 6 months ago, and he left a will. Daniel's voice was careful. Miss Bennett, he left everything to Eleanor. He never changed his will from 1960, never updated it after he remarried. His new family is contesting it, but legally, since Eleanor is also deceased, the inheritance passes to her heirs. Me. You. Clara felt like laughing and crying at the same time. The man who had abandoned her grandmother, who had caused decades of pain and struggle, had accidentally left everything to the granddaughter he never knew existed. How much are we talking about? Daniel handed her another document. Thomas Reed became quite successful in California, real estate mostly. His estate is valued at approximately $3 million. Samuel whistled softly. That's on top of everything Eleanor already left her. What about his other children? Clara asked. The family he chose over us. They're furious. Their lawyers have already contacted me. They want to negotiate a settlement, convince you to take a portion, and leave the rest to them. Daniel met her eyes. Miss Bennett, you have no legal obligation to give them anything. Thomas Reed made his choice when he walked out on Eleanor. His estate is yours by rights. Clara thought about her grandmother pregnant and alone watching her husband drive away. Thought about her mother growing up without a father, never knowing why. Thought about all the years she herself had spent in foster care alone and abandoned while Thomas Reed raised his new family in California sunshine. I don't want his money. Daniel blinked. I'm sorry. I said I don't want it, not because I'm noble or forgiving, but because that money is tainted. It came from a man who abandoned his wife and child, a man who never once reached out, never tried to make amends, never acknowledged that he had a daughter and granddaughter who needed him. Clara stood up, her voice steady, despite the emotions churning inside her. Give it to his other children. They didn't choose to be born to a coward any more than my mother did. They shouldn't suffer for his failures. Samuel looked at her with something like awe. Clara, that's $3 million. I know, and I don't care. I have everything I need. Everything my grandmother worked her whole life to give me. Clara turned to Daniel. Tell them I don't want a settlement. Tell them I'm signing over my rights to Thomas Reed's estate. All of it. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Daniel gathered his papers slowly, his expression thoughtful. You know, my grandmother always said Eleanor Bennett was the strongest woman she ever knew. I'm starting to think the same is true of her granddaughter. After Daniel left, Clara sat in the living room for a long time, staring at the letters he had left behind. Samuel had gone to check on Eleanor Rose, giving her space to process everything she had learned. Her grandfather had abandoned her grandmother. Her mother had grown up without a father. And somewhere in California, there were aunts and uncles and cousins who had no idea she existed until now. The Bennett legacy was more complicated than she had ever imagined. More painful. More human. She picked up the letters and began to read. The correspondence between Eleanor and Margaret spanned 50 years. Clara read for hours, watching her grandmother's life unfold through words written to a trusted friend. The early letters were full of hope and love, describing Eleanor's courtship with Thomas, their wedding, their plans for the future. Then came the abandonment, the struggling years that followed. Eleanor raising Sarah alone, building her secret empire one piece at a time, teaching her daughter the craft that had been passed down for generations. And then, in a letter dated 1999, Clara found something that made her blood run cold. Margaret, I'm terrified. Victor came to the house again today. He's been circling Sarah for months now, ever since he found out about the collection. He wants her to sell him pieces at a fraction of their value. Says he'll expose our family's work to the world if she doesn't cooperate. Sarah refused. She's strong, my daughter. Stronger than I was at her age. But I see the fear in her eyes. Victor is dangerous and we both know it. She told me she's going to talk to him one more time. Try to make him understand that the collection isn't for sale, that it belongs to the Bennett women and will never be given to an outsider. I begged her not to go, begged her to let me handle it. But Sarah has my stubbornness. She insisted that she could reason with him. I have a terrible feeling, Margaret, a feeling I can't shake. Pray for us, pray that I'm wrong. Eleanor Clara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. The letter was dated 3 days before her mother's death. Sarah hadn't died in a random accident. She had died on her way to confront Victor Harmon. Victor must have known she was coming, must have planned to stop her before she could threaten his plans. Clara had known Victor killed her mother, but she hadn't known that Sarah had been trying to protect the family when she died. Hadn't known that her mother had been as brave as Eleanor, as fierce as all the Bennett women who came before. She found the next letter in the bundle dated 2 weeks after Sarah's death. "She's gone, Margaret. My beautiful Sarah is gone. The police say it was an accident. A car ran her off the road on a mountain curve. No witnesses, no evidence. Nothing to prove what I know in my heart. Victor killed her. I know it. I can see it in his eyes when he comes to offer his condolences, reeking of false sympathy. He killed my daughter because she wouldn't give him what he wanted. I hired a private investigator. He found evidence that Victor's truck was in the area that night. Found proof that damage was repaired shortly after. But it's not enough. Not enough for the police. Not enough for justice. I'm going to spend the rest of my life gathering evidence against him. I'm going to make sure that someday, somehow, he pays for what he did. And I'm going to find my granddaughter, Clara." The baby Sarah left behind. "The authorities won't tell me where she is, but I'll find her. I'll watch over her. I'll make sure she survives. When the time is right, I'll bring her home. I'll give her everything Victor tried to steal, and together from beyond the grave, if necessary, we'll destroy him." Your devastated friend, Eleanor Clara, was crying now. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Her grandmother had known. From the very beginning, Eleanor had known who killed Sarah. Had spent 25 years gathering evidence, watching over Clara from afar, waiting for the moment to strike. Everything Clara had discovered, everything she had fought for, everything she had won, it had all been part of Eleanor's plan. A plan that had started the day Sarah died and ended the night Victor Harmon broke into this very house. Samuel found her like that, curled up on the couch, with the letters scattered around her, crying for the mother she never knew and the grandmother who had loved her from a distance for 24 years. "Clara, what happened?" She couldn't speak, could only hand him the letters and watch his face as he read them, watched his expression shift from confusion to horror to a grief that mirrored her own. "My God," he whispered when he finished. "She planned it all, every single step. She gave her life for this, for the evidence, for the case, for me." Clara wiped her eyes, but the tears kept coming. She knew Victor might kill her. She knew she might not survive to see me come home, but she did it anyway because she wanted justice for my mother. She loved you more than anything in the world. I know, I finally know. Clara picked up the photograph she had found months ago. Eleanor and Thomas, 1975. The face scratched out in anger. She lost everyone, Samuel. Her husband walked out. Her daughter was murdered. She spent the last 25 years of her life alone, planning a revenge she might never see. She wasn't alone. She had her work, her collection, her hope that someday you would come. Clara looked at the letters, at the decades of correspondence that told the story of a woman who refused to give up. I need to finish what she started. Not just the foundation, not just the exhibition. I need to tell the whole truth about the Bennett women, about what they sacrificed, about what they survived. How? A book, a documentary, something that preserves their stories for future generations. Clara stood feeling a new sense of purpose filling the emptiness inside her. Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah, they all deserve to be remembered, not just for what they created, but for who they were, for the battles they fought in secret, for the prices they paid. 3 weeks later, Clara received an unexpected visitor. She was in the barn cataloging pieces for the next exhibition when Samuel called to tell her someone was at the door. "Says his name is James Reed. Says he's your cousin." Clara's heart stopped. James Reed. Thomas Reed's grandson. A member of the family her grandfather had chosen over Eleanor. She walked to the house with her stomach in knots. A man in his 30s was standing on the porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. He had the same eyes as Clara, the same stubborn chin Samuel had noticed in Eleanor Rose. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," James said. "I tried calling, but I kept chickening out." "Why are you here?" "Because I had to meet you, had to see if you were real." He ran a hand through his hair. "My grandfather never talked about his first marriage, never mentioned Eleanor or Sarah. We didn't know any of you existed until the will was read. Now you do. Now I do, and I can't stop thinking about it." James took a deep breath. "My father is furious about the inheritance, so are my aunts. They want to fight you in court, drag this out for years. But I keep reading about you online, about the Bennett collection, about what Victor Harmon did to your family, and I think..." He trailed off. "You think what... I think we're not the victims here. I think you are. You and your mother and your grandmother." James met her eyes. "I think my grandfather was a coward who abandoned his pregnant wife because he couldn't handle her being more successful than him. And I think everything my family has was built on that betrayal." Clara didn't know what to say. She had expected anger accusations, legal threats, not this. "I don't want your money coming," she finally said. "I already told Daniel Whitmore. I'm signing over my rights to the estate." "I know, that's why I came." James pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is a check for $1 million, my share of my grandfather's inheritance." Clara stared at the envelope. "What?" "I can't keep it, not knowing where it came from, not knowing what my grandfather did to get it." James pressed the envelope into her hands. "Use it for your foundation. Use it for whatever you need. Just please take it." "I can't accept this." "You can. You have to." James's voice cracked. "I need to know that something good came from all this pain. That my grandfather's choices didn't destroy everything. Please, Clara, let me do this one thing." Clara looked at the check in her hands. $1 million. Enough to fund the Bennett Foundation for years. Enough to ensure that Eleanor's legacy would survive and grow. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." "Because I read your grandmother's letters. Daniel showed them to me before he came to see you. I read about Eleanor raising Sarah alone. About your mother dying on that road. About you growing up in foster care while my family lived in comfort." James wiped his eyes. "I can't undo what my grandfather did, but I can try to make it right, even if it's not enough, even if nothing will ever be enough." Clara made a decision. "Come inside," she said. "I think it's time you met your family." She introduced James to Eleanor Rose, who grabbed his finger and wouldn't let go. She showed him the barn, the collection, the legacy he had never known existed. She told him about Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah, about the generations of women who had built something extraordinary in secret. And when the tour was over, James sat in the kitchen with tears streaming down his face. "I had no idea," he whispered. "None of us did." "That's how Eleanor wanted it. She kept it secret to protect it. From my grandfather, from men who couldn't be trusted." Clara nodded slowly. "From the world that wasn't ready to see what women could accomplish." James looked at her with something like wonder. "And now you're showing everyone, making sure the whole world knows." That's what she wanted. That's what all of them wanted, even if they couldn't say it out loud. James stayed for dinner. Samuel cooked Eleanor. Rose charmed everyone with her babbling. And for a few hours, Clara felt like she had family. Real family. Not the one that had abandoned her mother before she was born, but one that was choosing to be present, choosing to make amends. When James left that night, he hugged Clara tightly. "Thank you for giving me a second chance, for not hating me because of what my grandfather did." "I never hated you. I didn't even know you existed." Clara stepped back and met his eyes. "But now I do, and I hope this isn't goodbye." "It's not. I promise you that." 1 year later, the full Bennett story was finally told. Clara had worked with a documentary filmmaker to create a 3-part series about the collection, the women who created it, and the crimes that had nearly destroyed it. The premiere was held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, with hundreds of people in attendance. Clara stood at the podium, Eleanor Rose on her hip, and looked out at the crowd. She saw Samuel in the front row, proud as always. She saw Patricia Torres, who had become a close friend. She saw James Reed, who had flown in from California for the occasion. And she saw the empty chair she had left for her grandmother. For Eleanor. For Sarah. For all the Bennett women who should have been there, but weren't. "This story isn't just about art," Clara began. "It's about women who refused to be invisible. Women who created beauty in secret because the world told them they couldn't. Women who passed down knowledge from mother to daughter, generation after generation, building a legacy that no one could take from them." She paused, collecting herself. "My great-great-grandmother Margaret started this tradition in 1920. She taught herself woodworking when women weren't supposed to have skills like that. She sold her pieces under a man's name because that was the only way anyone would buy them, and she taught her daughter everything she knew." Clara looked at the photograph of Margaret on the screen behind her. A strong woman with determined eyes and hands that had shaped wood into art. Evelyn continued the tradition, then Eleanor, then my mother Sarah, who died before she could pass it on to me. Clara's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "I grew up in foster care, not knowing any of this, not knowing I came from a line of creators, of survivors, of women who built empires in secret. Eleanor Rose reached up and touched her mother's face. Clara kissed her small hand and continued. But my grandmother never forgot me. She watched over me from afar. She gathered evidence against the man who killed my mother. She built a fortune and hid it away, waiting for the day I would find it. And when she died, she left me everything. Not just money, not just art, but a purpose. Clara looked at the empty chair. I'm standing here today because of Eleanor Bennett, because of Sarah Bennett, because of Evelyn and Margaret, and all the women who came before me. I'm standing here because they refused to let this legacy die. She held Eleanor Rose up for the crowd to see. And this is Eleanor Rose Bennett, the 6th generation, the next chapter in a story that started over 100 years ago. Clara smiled through her tears. I'm going to teach her everything I know. I'm going to make sure she understands where she comes from. And someday, if she chooses, she'll carry this legacy forward. The crowd erupted in applause. Clara stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed by the response, and found Samuel waiting with open arms. Eleanor would be so proud, he said. I hope so. I hope they all are. The documentary premiered to critical acclaim. It won 3 awards, including Best Documentary at a major film festival. More importantly, it brought attention to the Bennett Foundation, which received donations from around the world. Clara used the money to expand the foundation's mission. She created scholarships for young women artists. She established apprenticeship programs to teach traditional crafts. She funded research into overlooked female creators throughout history. And she began to learn woodworking herself. It started slowly, an hour here, an hour there, using her grandmother's tools in the barn. Samuel taught her the basics, drawing on knowledge he had absorbed from watching Eleanor over the years. She made mistakes. Ruined pieces started over. More times than she could count. But slowly, she improved. Her hands learned the feel of the wood. Her eyes learned to see the grain, to understand how the material wanted to be shaped. She created her first piece, a simple box, and felt a connection to her ancestors that she had never experienced before. Eleanor Rose grew. She took her first steps in the barn, surrounded by 100 years of family history. She said her first word, which wasn't mama or dada, but bird, pointing at one of Margaret's carved figurines. Clara laughed and cried at the same time. That's right, baby. That's a bird. Your great-great-great-grandmother made it. Eleanor Rose reached for the carving with chubby fingers, and Clara carefully placed it in her hands. Someday I'll teach you how to make your own. 2 years passed. Clara mastered the basics of woodworking and began to develop her own style. She created pieces that honored the Bennett tradition while expressing her own vision. Her work was featured in galleries, praised by critics, collected by people who recognized her talent. She never forgot where she came from. Never forgot the women who had made it possible. Every piece she created carried their spirit, their strength, their determination to leave beauty behind. James became a regular visitor to the farm. He brought his wife and children to meet their extended family. Eleanor Rose gained cousins she adored. The branch of the family that Thomas Reed had abandoned and the branch he had created were slowly knitting back together. On Eleanor Rose's 3rd birthday, Clara gave her a special gift, a small carving kit designed for children with safe tools and soft wood. This is how it starts, Clara said, kneeling beside her daughter. This is how the legacy continues. Eleanor Rose picked up a small carving tool and looked at her mother with serious eyes. Teach me, Mama. Clara felt tears threatening but held them back. Always, baby. I'll teach you everything. They sat together in the barn, surrounded by 4 generations of Bennett craftsmanship, and Clara guided her daughter's small hands through the first cuts. It was clumsy. The wood was marred more than shaped. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the connection, the passing down of knowledge from mother to daughter, the continuation of something that had started 100 years ago with a woman named Margaret, who refused to accept the world's limitations. Samuel watched from the doorway, a smile on his weathered face. You know, your grandmother used to talk about this moment, said she dreamed of seeing her great-granddaughter learn the craft. Clara looked up at him, her eyes shining. I wish she could have been here. She is here, in everything you've built, in everything you've preserved, in that little girl right there. Samuel walked over and ruffled Eleanor Rose's hair. The Bennett women are stronger than death. You proved that when you fought Victor Harmon. You prove it every day you keep this legacy alive. Clara looked around the barn at the hundreds of pieces her family had created over a century, at the photographs of Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah lining the walls, at her own work displayed alongside theirs, adding her chapter to the ongoing story. She thought about everything she had survived, the foster homes, Marcus's abandonment, Victor's attempts to kill her, the revelations about her grandfather and the family she never knew existed. She had come to Willowbrook Farm with nothing but a baby in her belly and $47 in her pocket. She had found a fortune, a heritage, a purpose, and a family that extended beyond blood and beyond time. And now she was passing it all on to Eleanor Rose. The brass key still hung on a chain around Clara's neck. The key that had opened the barn. The key that had opened her future. Someday she would give it to her daughter along with the story of how it came to her. But for now, she just held it close and watched Eleanor Rose make her first awkward cuts in the soft wood. The 7th generation of Bennett craftswomen had begun her journey, and Clara couldn't wait to see where it would lead. 5 years had changed everything at Willowbrook Farm. Clara stood at the entrance of the Bennett Museum of Women's Craftsmanship watching visitors stream through the doors on opening day. 5,000 people had registered to attend. The parking lot was overflowing. News crews from 6 different networks were setting up their equipment. Eleanor Rose tugged at her hand. "Mama, why are all these people here?" Clara knelt down to her daughter's level. "They're here to see what our family built, sweetheart. To learn about your great-great-great-grandmother Margaret and everyone who came after her. Including great-grandma Eleanor. Especially great-grandma Eleanor." The museum had taken 3 years to build. Clara had used the money from the collection sales, the foundation donations, and her own growing success as a woodworker to fund it. The building was designed to look like an extension of the original barn, modern but respectful of the past. Inside the permanent collection told the story of 5 generations of Bennett women. Margaret's earliest pieces occupied the first gallery. Evelyn's work filled the second. Eleanor's masterworks dominated the third. And in the fourth gallery, Sarah's unfinished pieces were displayed alongside Clara's own creations. But it was the 5th gallery that drew the most attention. Clara had called it the Inheritance. It contained not the artwork, but the story. Eleanor's journals, the letters between Eleanor and Margaret Whitmore, the police reports and private investigator files, the recording that had finally brought Victor Harmon to justice, and the photographs, dozens of them showing the Bennett women through the decades. Margaret at her workbench in 1925, Evelyn teaching Eleanor to carve in 1952, Eleanor holding baby Sarah in 1975, and the newest addition, Clara and Eleanor Rose, taken just last month, standing in the same spot where 4 generations had stood before them. Samuel found Clara in the crowd an hour after the doors opened. He was moving slowly these days, his 70 years finally catching up with him, but his eyes were bright with emotion. "Your grandmother would have loved this," he said. "I know, I wish she could see it." "She can? Wherever she is, she can see what you've done." Samuel put a weathered hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Clara. More proud than I've ever been of anyone." Clara hugged him tightly, not caring who was watching. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You saved my life. You helped me find everything Eleanor left behind." "I just pulled a trigger and lifted some boxes. You did the hard part." He stepped back and wiped his eyes. "Now go enjoy your day. You've earned it." The official dedication ceremony began at noon. Clara stood at the podium looking out at the crowd of visitors, journalists, dignitaries, and friends who had gathered to witness this moment. Patricia Torres was there now, a judge on the state Supreme Court. James Reed had flown in from California with his entire family. Mrs. Patterson, now 92, sat in a wheelchair in the front row, refusing to miss the event she had heard about for years. And beside Clara, holding her hand, stood Eleanor Rose, 8 years old now, already showing the stubborn chin and determined eyes of her namesake. "When I came to Willowbrook Farm 5 years ago," Clara began, "I was a pregnant woman with nothing, no money, no family, no hope. I didn't know that my grandmother had spent 25 years preparing for my arrival. I didn't know that behind the doors of an old barn there was a fortune waiting for me, a legacy waiting for me." She paused, looking at the museum that now stood where cattle had once grazed. "But this museum isn't about me. It's about the women who came before me. Margaret Bennett, who taught herself woodworking in 1920 when women weren't supposed to create anything more complicated than a pie. Evelyn Bennett, who continued the tradition in secret selling pieces under false names because the world wasn't ready to see what women could do. Eleanor Bennett, who spent 50 years building this collection and 25 years planning to bring her granddaughter home." Clara's voice caught, but she pressed on. "And Sarah Bennett, my mother, who died trying to protect our family from a man who wanted to destroy everything we had built." Eleanor Rose squeezed her hand, sensing her mother's emotion. "This museum exists because they existed, because they refused to give up, because they kept creating beauty even when the world told them they couldn't, because they passed down their knowledge from mother to daughter, generation after generation, building something that would outlast them all." Clara looked down at Eleanor Rose and smiled. And now the 7th generation is here, learning the craft, adding her own chapter to the story. The Bennett legacy continues. It will always continue, because that's what we do. We survive, we create, we leave the world more beautiful than we found it. The applause was thunderous. Clara stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed, and felt herself surrounded by the people she loved. Samuel, Patricia, James and his family, Mrs. Patterson reaching up from her wheelchair to grasp her hand. "You did it," Mrs. Patterson said, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "You really did it." "We did it," Clara corrected. "All of us, together." The celebration continued into the evening. Clara gave tours, posed for photographs, answered questions from journalists who wanted to know everything about the Bennett women. By the time the last visitor left and the doors closed, she was exhausted, but happier than she had ever been. She found Eleanor Rose in the 5th gallery, standing in front of the photograph of Eleanor and Thomas from 1975, the one with the scratched-out face. "Mama, why is the man's face gone?" Clara knelt beside her daughter. "Because Great-Grandma Eleanor was angry at him. He was your great-great-grandfather, and he hurt her very badly." "What did he do?" Clara had always known this question would come, had rehearsed the answer 100 times. "He left her when she was pregnant with my mother. He walked away and started a new family somewhere else." Eleanor Rose's face scrunched up with confusion. "Why would anyone do that?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Some people can't handle it when other people are stronger than them. Some people run away instead of staying to work things out." "Like my daddy?" Clara's heart clenched. She had told Eleanor Rose about Marcus years ago as gently as possible. Had explained that some fathers weren't ready to be fathers, that it wasn't her fault that she was loved beyond measure by everyone else in her life. "Yes, baby, like your daddy." Eleanor Rose was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at Clara with those determined Bennett eyes. "I'm never going to run away from anything, ever." Clara pulled her daughter into a hug. "I know you won't. You're a Bennett woman. We don't run." 2 weeks after the museum opening, Clara received a letter that changed everything again. It came in an ordinary envelope postmarked from San Francisco. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The letter was short. "Dear Clara, you don't know me, but I know you. I've been following your story for years, ever since the trial. I know what Victor Harmon did to your family. I know what you've built from the ashes he left behind. I'm writing because I have information about your mother's death. Information the police never found. Information that could change everything you think you know. My name is Rachel Chen. I was there the night Sarah died. I saw what happened. And I've been too afraid to speak up until now. If you want to know the truth, meet me at the address below. Come alone. And please don't tell anyone about this letter. Some secrets are worth dying for. This one almost killed me. Rachel." Clara's hands were shaking by the time she finished reading. She turned to the photograph and felt her blood run cold. It showed a car accident. Her mother's car crumpled against a guardrail, and standing beside it, illuminated by headlights, was Victor Harmon. But that wasn't what made Clara gasp. Standing next to Victor, clearly visible in the photograph, was another man, younger, thinner, with a face Clara recognized from the letters Daniel Whitmore had shown her. Thomas Reed, her grandfather. Thomas Reed had been there the night Sarah died. Clara couldn't breathe. Her grandfather hadn't just abandoned Eleanor, he had been involved in her mother's death. Had stood beside Victor Harmon as Sarah's car burned. She grabbed her phone and called Samuel. "I need you to come over, right now. Something's happened." Samuel arrived 20 minutes later and read the letter in silence. When he looked up, his face was gray. Thomas Reed was there, with Victor. "I know?" "But Thomas was in California when Sarah died. That's what everyone believed. That's what his family said." "His family lied. Or they didn't know?" Clara paced the room, her mind racing. "Samuel, what if Thomas and Victor planned it together? What if my grandfather helped kill my mother? Why would he do that? I don't know. Maybe Victor threatened him. Maybe they made a deal." Clara stopped pacing and looked at the photograph again. Eleanor's letters said Thomas was in debt when he left, said he took half their savings and disappeared. What if he never really got out of debt? What if Victor used that against him? "You're speculating." "I know, but this woman, Rachel Chen, she says she saw what happened. She says she's been afraid to speak up." Clara grabbed her keys. "I have to meet her." "Clara, this could be a trap. Victor is in prison, but he has friends, people who might want revenge." "I don't care. I need to know the truth." Clara met Samuel's eyes. "My grandmother spent 25 years searching for answers. She never found all of them. Maybe this is why. Maybe she never knew Thomas was involved. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'm coming with you. The letter says to come alone. The letter can go to hell. I'm not letting you walk into something dangerous by yourself. They drove to San Francisco the next day, leaving Eleanor Rose with James Reed and his wife. The address in the letter led them to a small apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. Clara climbed the stairs to the third floor, her heart pounding, while Samuel waited in the car with his phone ready to call police. The door opened before she could knock. Rachel Chen was in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and haunted eyes. She looked at Clara for a long moment, then stepped aside. I've been waiting for you. For 26 years I've been waiting. Clara entered the apartment and sat down in the chair Rachel indicated. Tell me everything. I was Victor Harmon's girlfriend in 1999. We'd been together for 2 years. He told me he loved me, that we were going to get married, that he was going to inherit a fortune from his Aunt Eleanor. Rachel's voice was flat, emotionless, as if she had rehearsed these words 1,000 times. But Eleanor wouldn't give him what he wanted, and then Sarah started threatening to expose him. Expose him for what? Fraud. Embezzlement. Victor had been stealing from his company for years, cooking the books to hide his debts. Sarah found out somehow. She told Eleanor, and Eleanor told Victor to turn himself in or she would go to the police. Clara felt sick. So he killed her to keep her quiet. It was more complicated than that. Rachel stood and walked to the window, unable to look at Clara as she continued. Victor didn't plan to kill Sarah. He planned to scare her, to run her off the road and make her crash nothing serious, just enough to send a message. But he needed help, needed someone who knew those mountain roads, someone who had a reason to hate the Bennett women. Thomas Reed. Rachel nodded. Thomas had been in contact with Victor for years. They met through some business deal, found out they had a common enemy. Thomas blamed Eleanor for ruining his life, for making him feel inadequate for being more successful than him. Victor blamed her for not giving him the inheritance he felt he deserved. So they planned it together. They planned to scare Sarah, but that night something went wrong. Thomas pushed too hard. The road was wet. Sarah's car went through the guardrail. Rachel's voice cracked. I was in Victor's car. I saw everything. I saw Sarah's car go over the edge. I heard her scream. Clara was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. We drove down to where she crashed. Victor and Thomas got out to check. I stayed in the car, frozen, terrified. They came back and said she was dead. Said we had to leave before anyone saw us. Rachel finally turned to face Clara. I wanted to go to the police. I wanted to tell someone. But Victor threatened me. Said if I ever talked, he would kill me. He meant it. I saw it in his eyes. So you stayed silent for 26 years. I ran, left California, changed my name, tried to forget, but I never could. I saw Sarah's face every night in my dreams. I heard her scream every time I closed my eyes. Rachel pulled out a box from under her bed. I kept everything. Photographs, documents, recordings of Victor confessing what he did. I kept it because I knew someday I would need proof. Why are you telling me now? Because Victor is in prison, because Thomas is dead, because I'm dying, Clara. Rachel met her eyes with terrible honesty. Cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe less. I can't go to my grave with this secret. I can't face whatever comes next, knowing I let your mother's killers escape justice. Clara looked at the box in Rachel's hands. Evidence. After 26 years, evidence that could prove her grandfather's involvement in her mother's death. What do you want me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. Go to the police, tell the media, or bury it and let the dead rest. Rachel handed her the box. I just needed someone to know, someone from Sarah's family, someone who could decide what happens next. Clara took the box and stood. Thank you for telling me, for keeping this all these years. Don't thank me, I'm a coward. I should have spoken up 26 years ago. Your grandmother might have found peace. Your mother might have gotten justice sooner. My grandmother found peace in her own way, and my mother has justice now. Clara walked to the door, then turned back. I'm going to make this public. Everyone is going to know what Thomas Reed did. His family, the world, everyone. Rachel nodded slowly. Good. It's what Sarah deserves. Clara called Samuel from the car. I got everything. Thomas Reed was involved. I have proof. My God, what are you going to do? I'm going to finish what my grandmother started. I'm going to make sure the whole truth comes out." The story broke 3 weeks later. Clara worked with a journalist from the New York Times to verify Rachel Chen's evidence and prepare the article. When it was published, it made headlines around the world. Grandfather helped murder his own granddaughter. New evidence in Bennett family tragedy. Thomas Reed's surviving family was devastated. James called Clara in tears, apologizing for his grandfather offering to return the money Clara had given them years ago. Clara refused. "You didn't know, none of you knew, and punishing you won't bring my mother back." "I don't understand how you can be so forgiving." "I'm not forgiving. I'm just tired of letting the past destroy the present." Clara looked at Eleanor Rose, who was playing in the yard. "My daughter is 8 years old. She's going to grow up in a world that knows the truth about her family, the good and the bad. She's going to learn that strength doesn't mean being perfect. It means surviving the imperfect things and building something better." Victor Harmon was charged with additional crimes based on Rachel's evidence. His lawyers argued that he couldn't be tried twice for the same murder, but prosecutors found ways around that. Conspiracy charges, obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence. By the time the new trial was over, Victor's sentence had been extended by another 30 years. He would die in prison. Clara made sure of that. Rachel Chen passed away 2 months after giving her testimony. Clara attended her funeral, the only person from the Bennett family to do so. She laid flowers on the grave and whispered a thank you to the woman who had finally found the courage to speak. The years that followed were the best of Clara's life. The museum thrived, drawing visitors from around the world. The Bennett Foundation funded hundreds of scholarships and apprenticeships. Clara's own work gained recognition, her pieces selling for prices that would have astonished her grandmother. Eleanor Rose grew into a remarkable young woman. She showed genuine talent for woodworking, creating pieces that already rivaled Clara's early efforts. But more than that, she showed the Bennett determination, the stubborn refusal to give up the commitment to building something beautiful, no matter what obstacles stood in her way. On Eleanor Rose's 16th birthday, Clara took her to the barn. The original barn, preserved exactly as Eleanor had left it now, part of the museum's campus, but closed to the public. "I have something for you," Clara said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass key. The key that had opened the barn all those years ago. The key that had changed her life. "This belonged to your great-grandmother. She left it for me, and now I'm giving it to you." Clara pressed it into her daughter's hand. "This key opened the door to our family's legacy. It's yours now, to keep, to treasure, to pass down to your own children someday." Eleanor Rose looked at the key, then at her mother. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Whatever you want. That's the beauty of inheritance, sweetheart. You take what you're given and make it your own." Clara smiled. "Your great-great-grandmother started this tradition in secret because she had no other choice. I've spent the last 16 years making sure the world knows what Bennett women can do. But you get to decide what comes next. You get to write the next chapter. What if I mess it up?" "You won't." "How do you know?" Clara took her daughter's face in her hands. "Because you're a Bennett woman. Because you have the strength of 5 generations in your blood. Because every woman who came before you faced impossible odds and refused to give up." She kissed Eleanor Rose's forehead. "Whatever you create, whatever you become, I will be proud of you. We all will be. Margaret and Evelyn and Eleanor and Sarah, they're all watching over you, cheering you on." Eleanor Rose threw her arms around her mother. "I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby, more than anything in this world." That night, Clara sat alone in the barn, surrounded by the work of her ancestors. The tools hung on the wall, still in the same positions Eleanor had left them. The workbench still bore the scars of decades of use. And everywhere, there was evidence of what Bennett women could create when they refused to accept limitations. She thought about everything that had happened since she first arrived at Willowbrook Farm. The discovery of the collection, the terror of Victor's attacks, the shock of learning about her grandfather's betrayal, the joy of building the museum, of raising her daughter, of carrying on a tradition that had started before her grandmother was born. She thought about the women who had come before her. Margaret, who had taught herself woodworking in an era when women weren't supposed to create. Evelyn, who had continued the tradition in secret, protecting the family's legacy. Eleanor, who had spent 25 years planning for Clara's arrival, preparing evidence, waiting for the chance to get justice for her murdered daughter. And Sarah, her mother. The woman she had never known but felt she understood now. A woman who had died, trying to protect her family. A woman whose spirit lived on in every piece of art, every scholarship funded, every young woman given the chance to create. Clara picked up a carving tool, felt its familiar weight in her hand, and began to work. She didn't know what she was making, didn't have a plan. She just let her hands move, let the wood guide her, let her heart pour out through her fingers the way her grandmother's had for 50 years. When she finally stepped back hours later, she saw what she had created. A tree. A family tree carved in perfect detail. The trunk was thick and strong, representing Margaret. The first branches were Evelyn and Eleanor. Sarah was a branch cut short, forever incomplete. Clara was a new branch growing strong. And at the very top, reaching toward the sky, was Eleanor Rose. The 7th generation. The future. Clara set the carving on the workbench beside her grandmother's tools. A new addition to the collection. A new chapter in the story. Samuel found her there the next morning, asleep in the old rocking chair, the carving still in her hand. He smiled and draped a blanket over her shoulders. Still working after all this time? Clara opened her eyes and smiled back. Always. That's what Bennett women do. I know. Samuel sat down beside her, his movements slower now, his hair completely gray. I've been thinking about retiring. Getting too old to keep up with this place. You'll never retire. You love it too much. Maybe, but I'm glad I got to see this. Got to see you become the woman Eleanor always knew you would be. He reached out and squeezed her hand. She'd be so proud, Clara. So incredibly proud. I hope so. I know so. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise through the barn doors. The light fell on the collection, illuminating 100 years of women's work, 100 years of strength and sacrifice and creation. Clara thought about everything she had and everything she had lost. The mother she never knew, the grandmother who had loved her from afar, the grandfather who had betrayed them all, the friends and family who had helped her along the way, and Eleanor Rose, her daughter, her legacy. The reason everything had been worth it. The brass key was gone now. Passed to the next generation, but its weight still lingered in Clara's hand, a reminder of the day she had opened those barn doors and found her destiny waiting inside. She had come to Willowbrook Farm with nothing. She had found everything, and now. Watching her daughter learn the craft, watching the museum welcome visitors from around the world, watching the Bennett legacy grow stronger every day, Clara knew that her grandmother's dream had finally come true. The secret was out, the story was told, the women were remembered, and the work continued. Eleanor Rose appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day, her carving tools in hand. "Morning, Mama. Ready to work?" Clara smiled and stood, feeling the ache in her joints that came from hours bent over the workbench. "Always, baby, always." They walked together into the barn, mother and daughter, 7th and 6th generation, carrying on a tradition that had survived abandonment and murder and secrets kept for 100 years. The sun rose higher, flooding the barn with golden light. And in the warmth of that light, surrounded by the work of her ancestors, Clara Bennett finally understood what her grandmother had wanted her to know all along. Legacy isn't about what you inherit. It's about what you create. It's about the love you leave behind. It's about the strength you pass to your children and their children, and all the generations yet to come. The Bennett women had built something extraordinary. Not just art, not just a fortune, but a chain of strength, stretching across 100 years, linking grandmother to daughter in an unbreakable bond. Clara had been the weakest link once. Homeless, desperate, alone. Now she was the strongest, and her daughter would be stronger still. That was the true inheritance. That was the real secret hidden in the barn. Not wood or money or even art, but love. Unbreakable, undying, eternal love. Passed down from mother to daughter, generation after generation, outlasting death itself. Clara looked at Eleanor Rose, already bent over her workbench, already creating something beautiful with her own 2 hands. And she knew with absolute certainty that her grandmother was smiling. The Bennett legacy was safe. The Bennett legacy would endure. The Bennett legacy would never, ever end.